Chapter 22:35. Li Jianyue was stunned by the question. Ha! Li Mosen looked at her with a sullen expression. But when he saw the cute expression on her fair and tender face, his mood eased a little. He asked, "Is that so?" Chapter 22:45. Li Jianyue immediately shook her head. "I don't want to go." She shook her head like a drum and shouted. Li Jianyue cried and hugged Li Mosen's arm. "How can I fall in love?" Looking aggrieved. "Daddy and Mommy said that I can't fall in love had already walked far away." Yeah. Yu Chulin and Li Jianxian had always disliked them for being too slow, so they had long walked away. There was a look of relief on his face. At this time, he reached out and patted her little head. Were left behind. "That's good." This was not the first time the scene had appeared, but every time, be led astray by these people had a strange sense of happiness. When Li Jianyue heard this, when the little girl acted coquettishly in front of him, so easy to be led astray. The sense of satisfaction in his heart could not be replaced by anything. It's not considered being led astray. The little girl's fair and tender face was full of exhaustion. Li Mosen raised his eyebrows slightly and said with a straight face, "At your age, he pursed his lips and said, 'Do you want to become like Moyun?' If you really fall in love, Li Jianyue whimpered and hugged Li Mosen's arm. "I'm also doing this for your own good." She finally resigned herself to her fate and stood up. "Come on, for my own good." However, she still half collapsed on him and stumbled as she said, "Aren't you afraid that my falling in love will affect my studies? I wouldn't have eaten so much." "Don't worry. It's all your fault. I won't fall in love at such a young age. You cooked the food so well and made the sauce so good. I must do well in my exams. You caused me to accidentally eat too much." I can't be a bad student. Didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's good to have this awareness. You're blaming me. Li Mosen touched her head. "It's your fault." His voice couldn't help but soften. Li Mosen was helpless. Now, he looked down at her, on your studies, his eyes full of love. Therefore, she couldn't fall in love at such a young age. "Next time, I'll have to work hard to keep an eye on you." Li Jianyue walked away angrily. Too much. As she walked, she rubbed her little nose. Pursed her lips and said vaguely, "Li Mosen looked at her cute little face. He said the same last time. His hand couldn't help but touch his heart. He still cooked a lot for her to eat. His heart, which had been restless for a whole day, returned to normal in an instant. Li Jianyue felt that she was kind, but so she definitely couldn't ruin his heroic words at this time. The sloppy look of Quan Jingyi just now appeared in front of him. Next time, he had to admit that Quan Jingyi was indeed good-looking. Well, but in fact, not only his appearance, had long but his height, that her eyes physique, were rolling around. Figure, and even his athletic talent saw that the smile in his eyes deepened. Such a person was Ursa's classmate. It was actually quite good to continue like this. The two of them were so close. Finally, they got on the car and reached home. But very quickly, was no longer that tired on the way back. Emotions in his heart and followed Li Jianyue. She went back to her room happily. Li Jianyue and Li Mosen had always shared a bicycle. Li Mosen was about to go upstairs when he suddenly heard the back seat of this bicycle was very soft and comfortable. Li Mosen stopped in his tracks and looked at Su being in contact with nature and the wind made Li Jianyue very happy. Su Qianxi stood at the door of the hallway she was not willing to change. "Come to your father's study." But today, Li Mosen felt inexplicably cut into pieces by someone with a scissors. Ever since he was something like a blade, Li Xiqing had always been strict with him. When Li Jianyue saw it, her eyes kind of strictness was different from the strictness he used on Li Jianxian. She quickly ran up and shouted, "Who did it?" Although he would also be fierce and scold his children, and he would even hit them when they were disobedient, his teeth suddenly clenched. However, when Li Jianyue saw the sponge that was exposed, he was not close to Li Xiqing. Her heart ached, he would always feel her eyes. Rarely asked him to go to his study. She stomped her feet and still a layer of separation. So evil to cut off my throne. Li Mosen's heart couldn't help but beat. Li Mosen frowned and looked at other places. Nodded and followed Su Qianxi. He found that the other places were safe and sound. Su Qianxi let him in and the leather seat of the bike were in good condition. Li Xiqing was sitting at the desk in the study, sorting out the paintings that Su Qianxi had drawn 2 days ago. Li Jianyue was on the verge of tears. She shouted, "You're definitely targeting me. 46. You just don't want me to sit in your car." Li Xiqing answered and carefully put the pile of paintings into the 36. "Sit down." Li Jianyue had always known that her brother was very popular with girls. Li Mosen became even more nervous. Accept such damage. Such a scene had happened before, very much. But without exception, every time it happened, thought about it felt different. The more aggrieved she felt. This time, Li Xiqing pouted and her eyes turned red, making it impossible not to tense up and treat him seriously. "What should we do now?" Li Mosen sat down on the chair in front of Li Xiqing's table. He walked to Li Jianyue's side and gently put his arm around her shoulder. Li Xiqing knew that he had become used surveillance cameras, so he didn't care and said, I heard that you want to get into Kingstown University." Li Jianyue sniffed. Li Mosen had told Li Jianyue about this before, so he wasn't surprised
It's so
that
damaged
he knew.
that we can't even sit on it.
He nodded calmly and said,
Limosin
yes,
pursed his lips
Dad.
and said, let's walk back.
I want to get into Kingstown University and stay in Kingstown.
It'll
You should
take
know
half
that
an
with your
hour to walk
qualifications
home.
and talent,
Mom
staying in
and Dad are
Kingstown
still
University
waiting for
is
us
a bit
to
of a
come home
waste.
for dinner.
Li
Su
Siqing looked at him with
and
his
Li
sharp
Siqing didn't
eyes.
spend much time at home.
Limosin couldn't help but
They were
straighten
either
his
on
back
business
and
trips
said,
or traveling.
I don't want to leave Kingstown.
The couple was very carefree
Why?
and happy.
Because I
It
grew up in
wasn't easy for them
Kingstown.
to be at home,
I
but they
can't
still
bear to
couldn't get home
leave.
in time.
Li Siqing
Li
listened to
Jianyue's
this
heart
and
was
didn't
about
say
to
anything.
die.
Let
Just
Uncle
then,
pick us up.
Su Qianxi made a few
There's
cups
no
of calming
hurry.
tea and brought them over.
Limosin patted Li Jianyue's
Inexplicably,
shoulder gently.
she felt that the way this
I'll
father
make
and
a
son
call and
interacted
take the
was a bit
opportunity
stiff.
to see who's behind it.
She quietly brought the
Li
tea over and
Jianyue's
sat
face
next
was
to
full
Li
of
Siqing,
reluctance,
waiting
but this
for
was
them
the
to
only
continue
way
the
now.
conversation. Just as they were about to walk to the security booth,
said,
a bicycle came toward them from
not
not far away. Su Qianxi felt
Li
that something
Jianyue
was
looked
wrong,
at the person and
but she
blinked.
still went to close the door.
Quan Jingyi was wearing a
The
school
moment the door
uniform
was
that didn't fit him
closed,
very well,
she heard Li
but his
Siqing's
youthful
voice.
aura was still very strong.
Do you not want to leave Kingstown?
He looked at Li
Or do you
Jianyue
not
and
want to
raised
leave
his thick
Ursu?
eyebrows slightly.
Limosin's heart suddenly
looked at
felt
the
like
back
it was
seat
being
that had been
fiercely
destroyed
grabbed
by
beyond
something.
recognition and asked,
In just a
"Do you want
moment,
me to send you back?"
Limosin's back was already
Li
covered with a
Jianyue
thin
was a
layer
little
of sweat.
surprised. And Su
This guy was
Qianxi
actually
so
so
smart
kind.
that she immediately understood
It was
what he
really
was implying.
surprising.
Her heart was
Jianyue
beating
looked
fast,
at the back seat
and
of
she
his
immediately
bicycle
turned
and found
around
that it
and
was
looked
also
at Li
very
Siqing in
comfortable and
disbelief.
soft.
At
For
this
a
moment,
Li
Li Siqing's
Siqing's
eyes
feel
were sharp
little
as he
tempted.
stared at Limosin.
Looking at the back seat,
The aura of
she
being in a
blinked
high
and
position
asked,
for many
"Your
years
house
was
doesn't live
completely
with
revealed
mine.
at this moment.
It's on the way."
Even she
Quan
herself
Jingyi
could
said
not
lightly.
quite withstand such coercion.
No need.
Limosin
What's
walked
more,
over with cold
Mosin was
eyes
just
and
a
said
child.
calmly, "Thank you."
At this
classmate
moment,
Quan,
Limosin
but I've
was
already
looking at
called
Li
our driver
Siqing
in
in
shock. He'll come to
He
pick us
quickly
up
lowered
soon.
his
eyes to hide his panic and asked,
Quan Jingyi
"Dad,
shrugged,
is there
looking
anything
indifferent.
different?" Forget it
Limosin
then.
lowered his blue eyes
Li
and
Jianyue
clenched
felt
his
a little
fists.
pity. But he
Actually,
knew that he looked
she didn't
too
want to
guilty
take a
now.
car.
Under the
Bicycles
pressure
were
of
the
Li
most
Siqing,
comfortable.
the secret that she had
On the
kept in
way
her
back,
heart for so
they
many
could watch
years
the
had nowhere
sunset
to
and
hide.
enjoy the breeze.
She frowned,
It was
walked
very
over to him,
comfortable.
and patted him on the
However,
shoulder. She couldn't trouble
Li
Quan
Siqing
Jingyi
then
to send her
calmed down
back.
a bit.
She had no choice but to
Limosin
follow
finally
Limosin's
felt that he
words
had
and
some
said,
breathing
"Our
space,
driver will be
but at
here
this
soon."
time,
The palms of his
"You should
hands
go
and
back
the back of his
quickly."
back were already oozing
Quan
sweat,
Jingyi smiled
and even his
faintly and
forehead
said,
had completely
"Remember to
exposed his
remove me from your
nervousness.
phone's blacklist."
He knew that he was
I'll
finished.
send you the portrait today.
Sure enough, he
Portrait.
heard Li Siqing say,
Li
"You knew
Jianyue's
since you were
eyes
young
lit
that you
up.
were not Ursu's biological
portrait.
brother, right? Is it the one you drew of
Mosin
me
pursed
sitting on
his
the
lips.
Ferris wheel?" Of course
Yes.
he knew. He had known
Limosin's gaze
since he
was
was slightly
young.
sinister as he coldly
Everyone
glanced
around
at
him was
Quan
reminding
Jingyi.
him that he was not Li
Quan
Siqing's
Jingyi acted
biological
as if
child.
he didn't see it and said, "He was
Yes,
just a
there
product
are
of
a
a
few
woman who
more.
had committed the most heinous
If you
crime
want
and
them,
messed
I'll
around
send
in
them
a
to you
foreign
together."
country." Limosin's tone was unfriendly as he asked, "Why
Chapter
did you draw her?"
2247.
Quan Jingyi was
It was for the
unexpectedly
sake of
calm.
living a good life in this family.
He said calmly,
"She's
he
pretty.
wanted to integrate into this
She
family
looks
and become a
beautiful
real
when you
member
draw
of this
her."
family. He didn't dare to reveal
Chapter
his thoughts about Li
2237.
Jianyue, for fear that Li
Why don't you
Siqing
pull
would
me
drive
out of
him
the
away
blacklist?
and separate him from Ursu.
Quan Jingyi looked down at her.
Limosin had been safe and
In front
sound
of him
for
was
so
her
many
dark
years,
little head,
which carried a
He
faint
didn't expect to be
fragrance.
discovered by Li Siqing
It
at this
smelled
time.
good, and he was in a good mood.
Limosin's heart was beating
"I
extremely
can't send it out
fast.
now, and you can't
In his
receive my
memory,
message." He had only felt such fear when he was 5 or
Li
6 years
Jianyue
old,
was a little
when he was held
surprised.
hostage by that crazy
Have we
woman,
already added
Tang
each other on
Menjing,
WeChat?
and his life was hanging by a
Why
thread.
didn't I know?
At this time,
Quan Jingyi
such
glanced at
emotions once
Limosin's
again shrouded
increasingly
his
ugly
heart,
expression,
making it difficult for him to
He
adapt.
pretended not to see it and said,
Li Siqing
"We
saw
added
that he
each other
didn't
last
speak,
time,
and already had an answer
I
in his
added it
heart.
from Yang Xiheo's phone."
He said meaningfully,
Li
Mosin.
Jianyue suddenly understood.
Limosin grabbed his thigh with
So
both
that's
hands,
how it is.
and his heart was already clear.
I thought it was Yang Xiheo's
Li
friend
Siqing
because the
knew.
last time Yang Xiheo
He knew
gave me a love
everything.
letter, he said it was
How
from
could a
his
smart
friend.
person like Li Siqing
Later,
not be able to
I found
guess?
out that the love letter was from
Limosin's heart was filled with despair. His
but when
WeChat
he
is
heard Li
also his
Siqing's
own.
voice,
He simply
as she
raised his head
spoke,
and said,
Li Jianyue
"Dad,
had already
I do
taken
know
out her
that I am
phone
not
and
your
asked,
biological
which
child.
one is it?
So I don't want to leave
Limosin
Kingstown.
didn't say anything.
I didn't ask you to leave."
He
Li
looked
Siqing
down at their
interrupted him.
interaction.
"I just
He
think that
that you should have a more suitable choice. And then loosened it again. Go abroad, he said calmly, or go to a better university in the country. The purpose of you coming here is to get Ursu to pull you out of the blacklist. Staying in Kingstown will only waste your talent. Naturally, he could easily sense the unhappiness in Li Mosen's gentle voice. listen to your
For
father.
some reason,
Quan
Lee
Jingyi was in a
Mosen
good
was silent,
mood, but on his fair skin,
he said,
his
"No."
Adam's apple had already moved
Meeting
up
Lee
and down a
Mosen's
few
cold
times.
and gloomy eyes,
Li
Quan
Xijing
Jingyi smiled
continued,
carelessly
"You are
and
too
said,
close to Ursu.
"I saw you standing here and thought
Maybe
you might
even
need
you don't
help.
know what your feelings for her
As for the
are.
portraits and blacklisting,
I suggest you
it's
go
just a
abroad
matter
for
of
a few years
convenience.
to calm down."
Your car was
Lee
clearly
Mosen
there."
panicked and said,
"No,
"How did you know that
Dad,
our car was
I
damaged?"
only have feelings for Ursu."
Lee Mosen's
like a brother
voice
and
was
sister.
slightly low.
"You are not."
He looked at him
Li
and said in a
Xijing's
low
eyes
voice,
were like an eagle,
"Do you know who
firmly
did it?"
grasping him as if he could
Li
see through his
Jianrui,
internal
who was
organs.
playing with her phone, also
All his
looked up.
secrets had been seen through by
Li
him.
Jianrui's face was full
She
of
frowned
anger.
and said, "Ursu has
She
been
shouted,
relying on Mosen
"Yes,
since she was
who?
young, and Mosen
Do you
is
know
used
who
to
it
Ursu's
is?"
pampering.
It's too
Their
hateful.
relationship is indeed better.
It must
but
be
they
a
grew up
girl.
together, so it's only
No,
right that they have a
Quan
good
Jingyi
relationship."
said calmly.
"What do
Then
you
it's a
think?"
boy.
"Yes, we should
Li
have a good
Mosen looked at
relationship,
Quan Jingyi
but there's
with his
something
blue
wrong with
eyes
the look in
narrowed.
his eyes." Li
There was a
Xijing
bit
said
of
with
malice
certainty.
in his words.
His voice
He
gradually
said with
became
some
speculation. "Could it be you?"
"Mosen,
Ursu
Li
only
Jianrui's
sees you as her
eyes
brother.
widened.
She's
No
still
way.
very innocent now.
Speaking of this,
She doesn't
Li
know
Jianrui
anything,
immediately
so she can't
remembered some
understand
bad
the
rumors
emotions
about
in your
Quan
eyes.
Jingyi.
As he
Bad boy,
spoke,
hooligan,
he stood up and
delinquent,
quietly approached
gangster.
her. With all these
I'm a
labels
man.
attached together, it
Of
seemed
course I know what
normal
you
to
mean
do
when you
such a
look at
thing.
her. Li
That wasn't the
Jianrui
way an
suddenly
older
felt
brother
a little
looked at his
scared
younger
and
sister
angry
at the same time.
Instead,
Why
it was
did
the
you
way
do
a man
this?
would look at a woman he adored.
Quan Jingyi looked at the angry
was an
expression on her
experienced
delicate
person,
face,
so
and
he
didn't know
naturally
whether
knew
to
what was
laugh
going
or
on.
cry. He said, "I
Li
wouldn't do
Mosen was
something
indeed
so
outstanding,
senseless. Smart,
Is that
well-behaved,
so?"
hardworking,
Li
and
Mosen's
eager to
voice
learn.
was indifferent.
But even so,
Since you
she
saw
was
who
not
did it
good
just
enough for
now,
Li
why
Xijing's
didn't you
only
stop
daughter.
him?
I
Li
didn't
Mosen
see it.
panicked and sat on the chair
Quan
as if
Jingyi's
his
soul
soul
had
had
been
been
sucked out of him.
I'm just guessing.
After all, he was
I
the
believe
child
you've
that
already
he had
seen
raised.
it.
Li
Seeing Li
Jianrui
Mosen
looked
like
at him.
this,
Li Xijing's eyes softened. Chapter
He said
22:38.
meaningfully,
"Mosen, you are
Sun
still
Xiaoyu.
young and outstanding enough."
Indeed,
Sun
Dad
Xiaoyu
will
was
recommend
indeed
you
the
to a
person who had
professor
the
at
most
New
motive
York
to do
Business
such a
School.
thing. I'll give
After
you a few
hearing
years
Quan
to calm
Jingyi's
down.
words,
Even her thoughts
Mosen
became
is the
very
older
clear.
brother.
Li
Are you
Jianrui
sure
said
you want
angrily,
Mosen to be with
"This Sun
Ursu?
Xiaoyu is too bad."
Are you sure?
Why did he do that? Because he hates you. Chapter
Quan Jingyi
22:48
said
with a faint smile. New York Business
After
School.
all,
You
you
just
a few
embarrassed him
years.
in public.
Calm down.
But
Every
it
word
wasn't
echoed
me.
in
In Li Mosen's mind
Li
several
Jianrui
times.
was furious.
The echoes shook
It was
him to
you
the
who
brink of
deliberately
collapse.
stretched out your leg when
Li
you walked
Mosen
over
stood
and
up
pretended to
abruptly
be
and
innocent.
shouted, "I don't want to go.
You're the worst.
I don't want to go, Dad.
I didn't.
I want to stay in Kingstown."
Quan Jingyi's
It would be a
voice was
waste of
faint
your
with a
talent
hint
to
of a
stay in
lazy
Kingstown.
smile.
I
Li
really didn't
Xijing's
do it
eyes
on
turned
purpose.
cold again.
The
He
table was
looked at
too
Li
small
Mosen in front of
couldn't
him and
fit my
said
legs.
coldly, "You are very
What else
talented
could
in
I do?"
physics."
Hearing
You can
this,
choose an
Li
excellent
Jianrui
physics
subconsciously
school,
looked
or
at
you can
Quan
go
Jingyi's
directly to my
legs.
alma mater.
Indeed, I will
It
arrange
looked a
the
little
best
long.
education for you. As the tallest
Li
person in the
Mosen
class,
wanted to say
Quan
something,
Jingyi could
but then
indeed
Su
say
Qinxi
such
came
words.
forward and gently held him.
Quan Jingyi felt her gaze
voice
and
was
naturally
soft and
withdrew
comforting
his
as she
legs.
said,
"Mosen,
Stop
your father
looking.
is doing this for your own good.
It's longer than you can imagine.
Calm down first."
What?
There was a
Li
moment of
Jianrui
silence.
muttered.
But she
Then,
felt
Li
a little
Mosen's
happy in
voice
her
was
heart.
almost cold and
It
emotionless.
turned out that Quan Jingyi was
was
also
eerily
someone who could
calm.
say such words.
He asked,
For my
she
own
really
good.
didn't notice it usually.
His voice was cold
It
and
seemed
very
that
stiff.
after
today's events,
Su
the distance
Qinxi was
between them
shocked
had
by Li
unknowingly
Mosen's
narrowed
behavior.
a lot. She
And
held
when
him and
Mosen
stood
saw the
beside
faint
him.
smile on Li Jianrui's
She
lips,
didn't know when
he
this
became
child
more
had
and
grown
more
up,
annoyed.
even to the point where she
It's
needed to
time
look
to go
up to
home.
him. Li Mosen's
Su
voice was
Qinxi
faint.
was slightly shocked.
"Let's go." She reached
Li
out and
Jianrui
gently
pouted.
comforted him. The car
Yes,
broke down.
Mosen, Dad and Mom
It'll
are
be
doing
fine
this for your own
tomorrow.
good.
Uncle
Your
Yang
father
will be
just
here
doesn't want
soon.
your talent to be buried.
Li Mosen
Don't
looked
give him
not far
excuses.
away. Li Mosen gently
Coincidentally,
pushed
a low-profile
Su
black
away
business
and
car
looked at
was
Li
driving
Xijing
in their
coldly.
direction.
"Do you
If
not
you don't
want me
want
to
to
take
buried,
the car,
or do you
I
not
can give
want
you
your
a
daughter
ride,"
to be coveted
Quan
by the
Jingyi
son of
said.
your enemy.
The young
Li
man's
Xijing's
voice was
face
exceptionally
suddenly
clear.
darkened. What did you say?
It's on the way. Li Mosen met
Li
Li Jianrui's
Jianrui really
eyes
didn't
and
want to take the
instinctively
car.
lowered his eyes. When she heard Quan
But in the
Jingyi's
next
words,
moment,
she
Li
thought
Mosen
about where
realized
Quan
what he
Jingyi's
was doing. He was
But the next
slightly
moment,
startled.
she heard Li Mosen's voice.
He lowered his head and clenched his fists.
No, it's too troublesome.
He said in a low voice.
Thank you for
I
your
know
kindness.
who my biological mother is.
Li Jianyue also felt
I know
that it was a
woman
little
destroyed your
troublesome.
family back then.
Although she still wanted
Since
to
I
agree,
was a child,
she felt that it was
people
not
around
a
me
good
have
idea.
always reminded me that I can have
After
everything
all,
I have today
although they had
because
known
of my
each other
mother's
for a
kindness.
while,
They were not very familiar with each other.
I can stand here because my mother saved my life twice from that woman.
She could only echo Lee Mosen's words and said,
Lee Mosen
suddenly laughed
sarcastically.
We can go back
He looked at the
ourselves.
intricate carpet under his feet and said
as
in a low voice,
soon as he finished speaking,
I've been your
the
son
family
for
car
so many
arrived.
years.
Lee Mosen opened the
I
car
don't want
door
to be
for
your
Lee
son now,
in a gentlemanly
Dad.
manner, revealing the
before
retro
he
and
said
comfortable
anything,
high-class
Su
interior.
Chancy covered his mouth.
This was the car Grandma
Su
had prepared
Chancy's
for them to
hands
send
had
them
a
to
faint
school.
aroma of tea,
But
mixed
who
with
knew
her
that
unique
none of the
scent,
children in the
forming
family
a
were
mother's
willing to
scent.
take a car?
Lee Mosen's
They
eyes
rode their
trembled,
bicycles
and he lowered
left.
his head to meet Su
Lee
Chancy's
Moyun was
gaze.
even more exaggerated.
Su Chancy was now 40
He took out a
years
small
old,
electric
but the
scooter
years
from
still
nowhere
left no
and
trace
sped to
on her
school
face.
every day.
Her face
He was
was 80%
happy.
similar to Lee Jianhue's.
When Lee Jianhua saw the
Su
comforting
Chancy's
middle-aged
eyes
and
were a
elderly
little
people
watery.
inside, she didn't
With
want
a little
to go
fear,
in. She shouted at him.
She pouted
Mosen.
and waved goodbye to
Calling
Quan
his
Jingyi
name
before getting
she
into her
burst
own
into
car.
tears.
Quan
Lee
Jingyi
Mosen
watched
was
as Lee
shocked.
Jianhua got into the car.
It was only then that he
The next
realized
moment,
how hurtful
he
his
met Lee
words
Mosen's
were.
dark gaze.
Li Xiqing's masseter muscles were twisted.
Chapter 22:39.
He quickly walked over and pulled Su
It was
Chancy
obvious.
over. Lee Mosen was very hostile
Looking at
to
the
him.
young man in front of him,
Quan
who was
Jingyi
already
looked at him with
comparable to his
interest.
height,
Li Xiqing
he
said
raised
in
his
a slow
eyebrows
voice,
slightly and
continue.
raised his chin.
Su
Aren't
Chancy's
you going to get
voice
in the
was
car?
already trembling.
Li Jianhua,
Mosen,
who was in the
whether
car,
it is in the
also
past or
heard
now,
this.
to us,
You
she
are no
looked at Lee
different from
Mosen and
Daesu
patted
and
the
Ersu.
seat beside her. Brother Mosen, get in the car. Chapter 22:49.
Only then did Lee Mosen retract his gaze.
Su Chancy's voice
The
was a
cold
little
warning
loud,
aura on his
and it
body
poured into Lee
disappeared
Mosen's
without a trace
ears.
the moment he turned around.
He was stunned and then fell
It
silent.
was as if nothing had happened.
Li Xiqing looked at the
Quan
child in
Jingyi
front of
watched
him
the
who
door
he had raised
close
with
and
his
the
own
black
hands
car
and
drive
narrowed
away.
his eyes. He began to have a
What?
terrible guess in his
Are
heart.
you done?
When they
Lee
met at the
Mosen
amusement
pursed his
park,
lips and
Qin
clenched his
Shizhao
fists.
had been thinking about Lee Mosen
He
for a
nodded
long
at Li
time,
Xiqing.
so she went to inquire
I'm
about
done.
a lot of things early in the morning.
Li Xiqing reached out and
Qin
patted
Shizhao
Su
was good at
Chancy beside
information
him.
channels. He said
The
word by
information
word
that she could
since you're
say
done,
was usually
go back to
true.
sleep. Lee Mosen
Lee
was
Mosen
not the
clenched
Lee's
his
family's
fists even
biological
tighter.
son. He bowed
He had
slightly
heard
to
Qin
them and turned
Shizhao
to
gossip
leave.
before.
Just at the
And
moment
now,
when he turned the
Lee
door
Mosen
handle,
was obviously
Su
very
Chancy
hostile
stopped
to
him.
And this
Mosen.
hostility was not
Lee
just because
Mosen
his sister was
paused.
coveted and he wanted to
Su
protect her as
Chancy
an elder
suddenly
brother.
felt a little sad and whispered,
But, as
no
a
one
man,
doesn't want their
it was the
child to
warning
be
of a
good.
wolf when facing a rival
You are
in
our
love.
child.
It had to
What
be
your
said
father
that for a
just
moment,
said to you is the
Quan
best
Jingyi
plan.
was indeed attracted by Lee
You are
Mosen.
too young now and don't
But
know
he
what
was
you
not
want.
someone who would give up easily
What you
because
need
of
most
this.
now is not our affirmation,
Quan Jingyi
but
rode the
calmness.
bicycle and faced the evening
After
wind.
a period of time,
He
you will
was in
think
a
through
rare
a lot
mood.
of things.
It
Lee
seemed that it had
Mosen
been a
listened
long
to this
time
and
since he had been
paused.
so challenging.
He finally turned the
If he
door
really
handle
started
and took a
dating
step
Lee Jianhua,
forward, what would Lee Mosen's
was
reaction
not.
be?
They did
He
not
was
know
looking
what he
forward
wanted
to
at
it.
all.
The car
liked
drove in the
Ersu,
direction
not
of
because he was
Yusho.
impulsive.
It was not far
Ever
and
since he
only
was
took
young,
10 minutes.
he was well aware of his own
However,
background.
Li Jianhua felt that this part of the
Therefore,
road
he
was a
wanted
little
to repay the
troublesome.
favor by doing something
Looking
that
at
he
the
could do
comfortable
within his
middle-aged and
abilities.
elderly people around her,
But he did not
she
know
felt
when he started to
uncomfortable.
be obsessed with this
She
feeling
fell
of
onto
being
Lee
needed.
Mosen's lap and said
The
coquettishly,
innocent and lovely
when can our
Ersu
car be
always
repaired?
looked at him with her round eyes
Lee
and
Mosen looked at the
smiled.
girl on his lap with
She
gentle
called him
eyes.
obediently and cutely.
He couldn't
Brother
help
Mosen,
but raise his
Brother
hand
Mosen,
and gently
I
push
want
the hair
this.
on her forehead away.
Brother Mosen is the best.
said
Brother
gently,
Mosen is of
very
course
soon.
the best person.
Let Uncle
I
Yang
like
repair
Brother
it.
Mosen the most.
It can be repaired today.
Mosen walked up the stairs
Li Jianhua
absent-mindedly.
pouted and lowered her head to
When
play
he
with
thought
her
of
fingers.
Ersu's face, the
She
gloominess on
snorted
his
and
face
said,
lessened
what
slightly.
if it can't be repaired?
Even his gaze
Then
softened.
let Uncle Yang buy us a new
And at
car.
this moment, there was a
Li
slight
Mosen
sound of the
gently
door
twirled his
opening
fingers
upstairs.
around her soft hair and
Li
suddenly
Jianhua's
said,
little head
how about a
popped
little
out.
electric donkey?
When she saw
Li
Li
Jianhua's
Mosen, she
eyes lit
blinked
up
and said, Brother
Can
Mosen,
I? What's wrong?
I want to ride on the
Why
electric
did Dad
scooter
ask you to
too.
go?
It's
When Li
fast and
Mosen
saves
saw Li
energy.
Jianhua's innocent and adorable
Well,
face,
maybe we can also
the gloomy
change
look on
to a
his face
motorcycle.
disappeared the moment he saw
Li
her.
Mosen looked at her face,
He walked
which
up
was
to
similar
her and
to
gently
Su
pressed her
Chancy's,
head,
and reached out to
Why
touch
aren't
her
you asleep
eyelid.
yet?
Li
Although Li
Jianhua blinked her
Jianhua
eyes
was clumsy and her
subconsciously.
reaction was a little slow.
Her thick and long
At this
eyelashes
moment,
brushed
she could
past
also
his
sense
fingers,
Mosen's
leaving a slight
unhappiness.
itch.
What's
Li
wrong?
Mosen's heart skipped a
Did
beat
Daddy
as he looked
scold
at
you?
her.
His gaze
Mosen's
moved
gaze
from her eyes eyes to her nose and finally
He
to
looked
her
at her
lips.
and nudged her.
Plump and rosy,
Let's go in first.
smooth and small,
Let's
very
talk
beautiful.
inside.
Li Jianhua quickly
blinked her
turned
eyes
back and then opened the door
Mosen.
to let him in. A motorcycle
When
is
Li
fine
Mosen came
too,
in,
but
he
do you
wanted
know
to
how to
close
drive
the door.
one? But in the next moment,
Yes.
a wave of bitterness
Let's
poured
change
into
to
his
a
heart.
motorcycle then.
After
Li Jianhua
hesitating
said
for
as
a
she lay
moment,
on Li
he
Mosen's
opened the
lap
door
and
and
giggled.
walked in. A motorcycle
other
was
hand,
faster
Lee
and very
Jianwei was a
cool.
little surprised.
Let's go home and ask Mom and
why
Dad.
didn't you close the door?
If they agree,
As he
we'll
spoke,
change. He walked up and closed
When Lee
the door
Jianwei
behind
heard
him.
this,
Her face
then
suddenly fell.
he turned around and jumped back
You're
to his
so
bed.
annoying.
What's wrong?
Mom and Dad will definitely say that it's dangerous.
What do you want to talk to me about?
The soft little
Chapter
mattress trembled as she
22:40.
sat down. Lee Jianwei's face was full of surprise. Lee Mosin said,
Wow,
if I go
that's
abroad,
great.
will you miss me? Brother Mosin, you're so amazing. Lee Mosin could clearly feel her
22:50.
admiration. Lee
The corners
Jianwei's
of his
big
lips
eyes
curled
were
up.
filled with questions.
Are you happy that I'm so
She
amazing?
looked at him and realized that Lee Mosin
Yes.
had an indescribable feeling
Lee
today.
Jianwei's
eyes lit up.
There was an indescribable
She looked at Lee
emotion in his
Mosin
deep
and said
gaze.
enviously,
If only
Lee
I were
Jianwei's
half
heart
as smart
felt
as you and
slightly
my
lifted.
brother.
She
Lee
was
Mosin
actually a little
smiled.
nervous. You're already
Is that
half as
so?
smart as I am. Lee Mosin did not
If you're
answer.
not smart enough, let me make up
Instead,
for it with
he
my
asked,
intelligence.
Do you want me to go abroad? Lee Jianwei was a little
Do you want me to go
depressed.
abroad?
But that's
Do you want
because
me
you're
to?
smart, not because
Perhaps
I'm
even
smart.
Lee
Mosin himself did
If
not
I were as
realize
smart
that at
as
this
you,
moment, I
his
would
hand was
definitely be
already
better
on his
off than
knee.
I am now. A pair of eyes
Look at
were
Sister
staring
Pan
straight
Pan.
at Lee Jianwei. She's so
The
smart.
anticipation in his eyes
Mom
had almost
said that
turned
Sister
into
Pan
desire,
Pan inherited
forcing
the
her to give him
intelligence
the
of
answer
Uncle
that he
and
longed for
Qingyu.
deeply in his heart.
That's why she's so
Lee Jianwei
outstanding.
also noticed that there was
But I
something
didn't
wrong with
inherit
Lee
the
Mosin's
intelligence of
gaze,
Mom and
but
Dad.
she was not afraid.
We're all born from the same
Instead,
parents.
she tilted her head and said,
Why is my
I don't
brother
want you
so
to go
smart?
abroad, but I know that
He
with
thought
Brother
that you and
Mosin's
Daesu were
intelligence
twins,
and ability,
and he sucked
you
away
can
all the
definitely stand
nutrients in
higher
you.
and further.
Lee Mosin joked.
A small
When we
Kingstown
get
can't
home,
restrict
go
you.
beat him up. Lee Mosin
I'll
had
help you
originally
beat him
thought
up
that
until
with Lee
he's looking for
Jianwei's
his
teeth
teeth
all over
temperament.
the floor,
She would only say yes
Lee
or
Jianwei
no.
laughed out loud.
However,
the words
her
that came
eyes
after were
curved like
exactly the
crescent
same
moons.
as what Li Xiqing had said.
She looked at Lee Mosin and
Lee
said,
Mosin did not
okay,
know what he was
then let's
feeling
go
at this
back
moment.
and do a mixed doubles later.
He looked at her and quietly
Lee Mosin
loosened his
smiled
fists.
silently.
Suddenly,
He caressed her
clenched them
forehead
tightly.
and said,
Actually,
looking
you're
at
very
her,
cute.
his gaze unconsciously
Don't care what
deepened.
others say to you.
He asked softly,
Everyone has
so,
their own
do you
life.
also think that I should leave?
You're the little princess of
Lee
our family.
Jianwei noticed Mosin's unhappiness
You don't have to be
and
smart.
immediately shook her head.
You just have to be
She
responsible
said,
for being
this is
cute
not
and
leaving.
pretty.
How
Lee
can this be
Jianwei felt
considered
happy
as
when she
leaving?
heard that.
You see,
She
brother
snorted
has been
lightly.
studying in the capital for so
That's
many
right.
years.
I just
But
have
in
to
my
be
heart,
responsible
brother
for
will
being
always
cute
be
and
brother.
pretty.
Although
Yes,
he went to the
and then
north to
find a
study,
smart man
which is
to be
very
your
far
husband.
away from me, I
Let
also
him
know
love
that
and
the
dote on
education
you.
in Kingstown is not as
Then you
good
can
as that
live
in the
like this
capital.
for the rest of your life.
Even the best
and live
and the
happily
best
ever
school is
after.
unable to develop brother's
In
talent.
fact, Mommy is a very
That's why
smart
Dad and
independent
Mom
person.
sent brother to the capital back
Brother
then.
Mosin, did you know?
No, they just want
I
Daesu
heard
to
from
spend more
Qingyu
time
that
with
when
your
Mommy and
grandparents.
Daddy were still young,
Lee
Daddy
Mosin's
went
tone
missing
was
for a
very
few
firm,
years.
and he believed it without
At
a
that
doubt.
time, Mommy had just
No,
gotten pregnant,
it's not what
and
you
Daddy
think.
disappeared.
It's one thing
Mommy
for
was the
Grandpa
one
and
who
Grandma
raised
to
me
want
and
someone
brother.
to accompany them.
At that time,
That's just
she
one
had to take
factor.
care of a company by herself.
But Dad's biggest plan is to
At
give
that
brother
time,
the best
the
education.
company was also very powerful.
Look, if Dad and
Mommy
Mom
was
hadn't
really
sent brother to
amazing.
Kingstown back then,
But after
he
Daddy
wouldn't have
came
become
back,
the youngest
Mommy
master
didn't even
student
have
in
to
the
wear
world
her
of
own
scientific
clothes.
research.
Daddy was
Now,
the one who
the
dressed
best
her.
scientific
Lee
research in the country is in
eyes were full of
Kingstown.
envy and longing.
That's why Dad let
Ever
brother
since
and
I
brother
was
Chu
young,
come back to
Dad
study.
rarely dressed me.
Lee Mosin had never
She thought
of
for a
this,
moment and
nor
said,
had he heard
"But I'm
anyone
fine."
mention it.
Dad
He had
doesn't
thought
even
many
dress my
times
older
that Yu
brother.
Chulin and Li Jianxian
Lee
were
Mosin
homesick
felt
and
a little
wanted to stay
sad
in
when he heard
Kingstown.
this. That was
Lee
why
Mosin
they
had
had
heard
used
a
the
lot
best
about what
excuse
Su
to come back
Qianxi had
to Kingstown
experienced
for
in the
scientific
past.
research.
He knew that all
Li
these
Xiqing
nightmares
just
and tragedies
acquiesced.
originated from his biological mother.
But now Li
If it
Jianwei
weren't for
told
his
him that in
biological
fact,
mother,
Li
Li
Xiqing
Xiqing
and
wouldn't have
Su
gone
Qianxi
missing.
had already arranged everything
Su Qianxi
tacitly.
wouldn't have had to bear so
Li
much
Mosin
on her
recalled
own.
that when he was very young,
Moreover,
Li Xiqing had
at
asked
that
him more
time,
than once,
no matter how
"What do you want
difficult
to do
and
when you
sad
grow
Su
up?"
Qianxi was,
At that
she still
time,
went against
Li Mosin
everyone's
was still
opinion
young,
and adopted
and
him.
his answer was different every
now
time.
that he had grown up, he should repay
Sometimes
this kind
his answer
woman.
was that he wanted to be a
Li Mosin
scientist
caressed
because
Li Jianwei's
scientists were
forehead
great.
and asked softly,
Sometimes
"You won't in the future."
his answer was that he wanted to be
You
a
will
doctor
only
because
enjoy
he
all
didn't
the
want
happiness
illness
that
to
your
torture
mother
humans.
enjoyed. Later, Li Mosin asked him again,
Chapter
"What do you want to do
22:41.
when you grow up?"
Okay, I think so too.
Mommy
Mommy and Daddy both said that although I'm not as smart as you and Big Brother, in fact, my luck has always been the best also since crying I was young. Directly. Ever since I was very young, old Master Lee, I often won the lottery, had just passed away. Plus, I have the best Lee daddy, quickly the best mommy, tears and the best grandpa, I want to be a god, and Big so that Brother. I can protect the people I want to protect. As she spoke, Her eyes
I
turned
won't let
into
death
crescents.
take away the people I care about.
She looked up at Li
that
Mosin
time,
and said,
Li Xiqing
and
looked
you.
at him quietly for a while,
Li Mosin's
but did not
eyes
say
turned
anything.
into crescents. He only
Li
hugged him in
Mosin's
his
heart
arms
suddenly
and patted
felt
him
as if it had been
silently.
injected with a warm
Li
current.
Mosin could not stop his
He couldn't
tears
help
at
but
that time,
smile and
his
said,
heart was
"Yeah.
even more sad. We're here."
They were finally going to
Uncle
drive him
Yang
away,
stopped the
weren't
car
they?
and pulled the handbrake.
After all,
He was
Li
the son of the
Jianwei
enemy,
immediately got
and
up
they were
and
not as
hurriedly
close to
opened
him
the
as
car
they were to
door
their
and
own
got
children.
out.
In
When
this
Li Mosin
family,
saw her
other
jumping
than
up
Su
and down with her
Qianxi,
school bag
only
on her
Grandpa
back,
Li Sun
his
loved
heart
him
that
the
had been
most.
depressed for the whole day
Now
finally
that
cleared
Grandpa
up.
Li Sun had passed away,
Li Jianxian
and
realized that Li
did not
Mosin
have
seemed
her
to
own
be in a good
opinions.
mood that day.
Li Xiqing had
Even
been
when he
harmed
went out
so
for a
badly
night
by
run,
Tang
he was
Menjing.
smiling. How could he
Yu
allow the
Chulin
son of
also
such a
noticed
person
Li
to be by
Mosin's
his strange
side.
behavior?
He was afraid that
couldn't
it was
help but
premeditated
smile
to
and
get rid of
say,
him.
"Hey, Mosin."
But because everyone knew that
Li
they had
Mosin
adopted
turned
him,
around and
it
looked
was
at Yu
reasonable
Chulin.
for them to be responsible
The
for his
faint
future.
smile on his face,
That
as
was
well
why
as
they
his
kept
obvious
asking
good
him
mood,
what he wanted to
made
do
Yu
in the
Chulin
future.
recall the hostility Li
It was
Mosin had shown
convenient.
him previously.
They could give him a good
His smile
path for his
deepened as
future
he
now,
asked,
and
"Do you
then
want
they
to
could
play
get rid of him
basketball?"
openly. The more Li
Sure.
Mosin thought about it,
Li
the sadder
Mosin
he
raised his
became.
eyebrows.
Finally,
Desu,
on that quiet
come along
night,
too.
he cried his heart out.
Li Jianxian was panting
Fortunately,
slightly from
then
running.
on, Li Xiqing
When he
never
saw
asked
the
him
intense
again.
atmosphere between them,
Li
he
Mosin did
nodded
not
his
know
head.
if Li Xiqing knew what he
When
was
Li
thinking,
Jianwei heard
but
that
from
they
then
were going
on,
to play
he
basketball after
subconsciously
taking
stayed
a
away
shower,
from him.
she ran out happily
Although
and
he called
squatted
him
at the
Dad,
side to watch
his
them.
heart was gradually drifting
Su
away.
Qianxi and Li Xiqing
Perhaps
also
Li
came out
Xiqing
for a
also
walk.
noticed it, so he
At a
cooperated
glance,
and
they
stopped
saw the
asking about
huge
Li
basketball
Xiqing's life
court
and
under the
future
night sky.
aspirations. The three
Li
youths
Mosin
were
finally
sweating
felt
profusely
relieved.
and full of youthfulness.
From then on,
his world was
smile on
subconsciously
Su
only
Qianxi's
Su
face was still
Qianxi and Li
gentle.
Ersu.
She held
Su
her husband's
Qianxi
arm
was
and
gentle
said,
and kind,
"The children have
and Li
all grown
Jianwei
up."
was pure and innocent.
Li Xiqing only showed
He
a
had
gentle
long decided
expression
to
beside
protect
his
these
wife.
two women to the end.
When he saw how
But
happy
he never
Su
expected
Qianxi
that Li
was,
Jianwei
the
would
corners
say
of his
such a
lips
thing.
curled up slightly,
Could
and
it be
said,
that he had
"They've all
misunderstood
grown
Li
up."
Xiqing?
We can
Li
rest
Mosin
assured
knew
in
that
the
Li
future.
Jianwei was not a person
When
who would
Desu
lie.
graduates,
So he asked,
let's leave the
"Did
company
Dad
to him
ask
and
you to
travel
say
around
these
the
words?"
world. Why
Su
did Dad
Qianxi
tell me all
glanced at him,
this?
slightly dissatisfied.
I heard this from Grandma
and, said,
and Grandpa.
"How old is Desu now?"
In the past, I
Can't
couldn't
you let
bear
him
for
play for
brother
another
to go to
2
school.
years?
Grandpa
How can that
hugged me
be?
and explained it to me.
Children are meant to be used.
Only then did
Li
I know
Xiqing
that
said
Dad and Mom
seriously.
sent brother to school in the
Other than
capital for his
Ersu
own
and
good.
Moyun,
Everyone else can
accompanying
be used.
Grandma and Grandpa was
Li
also one of
Jianwei's
their
ears
goals.
were sharp. But more
When she heard
importantly,
this, they
she
wanted brother
immediately
to
stood
stand
up from the
out.
ground and shouted,
Li
"Dad,
Jianwei was baffled.
how can you say that?"
Li Mosin
I can
pursed
use
his
it
lips
too.
and asked softly,
Although
"Did
I'm
Dad
only in my
just call
first
me to
year
the
of high
study?
school, I'll be interning in the company in
and
my
then,
junior year."
Li Jianwei
Although Li
realized that
Ersu
Li
was not
Mosin's
very
repressed
smart,
emotions
she had
seemed
been
to
the
have
cutest
loosened.
since she was a child.
She was
and she
elated
looked the
and
most
asked,
similar to
"Did he
Su
let you go
Qianxi?"
abroad?"
Yes,
In addition
he
to the
wants
debt
me
he
to go
owed
to
New
her
York
when they were
business
young.
school.
Among the 3 children of Li
Wow.
Xiqing, he
Li
doted on her the
Jianwei
most.
exclaimed.
Now that he heard his daughter being so
That's
sensible,
Dad's alma
he
mater.
actually felt a little gratified
Daddy
and
really
couldn't
likes
help
that
but
place.
smile. A
You've
while
grown
ago,
up.
Big Brother said
Li
that he
Jianwei
wanted to
took
go
it
there
as
to
a compliment
study,
and
but
replied
Daddy said that he
proudly,
was not
"Of course."
suitable and wouldn't let Big Brother
Su
go.
Qianxi couldn't help but
Li
laugh.
Mosin's face was full of doubt.
Speaking of which, Mosin is
Really?
going to take the college entrance examination this year.
Have you asked him which
Chapter
university he's going to?
2252.
Li Jianwei
Li
replied.
Mosin looked at Li
Yes,
Jianwei's
he
serious
said he wanted to get
expression
into
and pursed his
Kingstown
lips.
University. Was that what he
Kingstown
said?
University was also the best
Who?
key university in
Dad?
Kingstown.
Li
However,
Jianwei looked at
this
him
key
and nodded.
university was only in Kingstown.
Yes, it was Dad who said it. Mom said
Chapter
that although Brother Mosin
2242.
is smart, his personality
Hearing her
isn't as
daughter's
cheerful
words,
as mine.
Su Qianxi was a little
She
surprised.
asked me to spend more time with you and
Although
then take you out
Kingstown
to have
University
fun.
was not bad,
Li
Mosin
Jianwei
was
walked
more
over to
interested
Li
in
Mosin
physics,
and said,
and
Mom
Kingstown
said that
University
although
was
Brother
more
Mosin
famous
is
for its
smart,
chemistry
his
department.
personality isn't as cheerful
She once
as mine.
thought that even if Mosin did
Li
not want to go
Mosin paused
abroad,
for a moment
he would
and
probably
stood
go to
rooted to the
Tsinghua
ground.
University, Capital
Li Jianwei
University,
stood in front of
Fudan
him
University,
and pinched his nose
or the
with 2
University of
fingers.
Science and Technology.
She said,
"You can't
Ersu's
do without
answer
me
was
at
far
all."
beyond her expectations.
Look at how long I haven't looked at you,
Chansey
and
was
you're
a little
already
puzzled
so
and
unhappy.
asked, "He told you that?"
Yeah.
Li Mosen's nose was
Jianyue
pinched.
did not think there was anything wrong
At this
with
moment,
it. His heart was
she
itching.
tilted her head and said,
Just
he
as
said
Li
that this
Jianyue's
way,
hand was
we
about
don't have to live
leave,
on campus,
he finally couldn't
and he can
help
send
but
me to
reach
school
out
on
and
his
grab her
bicycle
small
every
hand.
day.
Li Jianyue was stunned.
Seeing her daughter's
The next
silly
second,
look,
Su
her body
Chansey
felt
couldn't
light.
help but laugh. Li Jianyue
So
exclaimed
you asked
out
your
of
brother
habit.
to stay?
The next moment, she was already in Li between her parents and inserted her hands into Li was pressed on his shoulder. Arms. She could clearly smell. She said coquettishly, the smell of hot pot on his body. It's obvious that brother can't bear to leave me. Li Jianwei blinked and turned to look at him. Where can he find such a cute and beautiful also turned his head slightly. The two of them faced each other, less than half a fist apart. Well, you've completely inherited your father's thick skin. Li Mosen's nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of her body but when he heard his lover's words, he did not feel that he was being scolded. Instead, the fragrance he said proudly into his heart. That's good. While it made him feel the quality of our family, he couldn't help but feel restless. Li Jianwei smiled and stayed in the middle of them. Li Mosen's heartbeat sped up unconsciously. Looking at the three teenagers running on the basketball court, cheeks and bright eyes, he felt as if his heart had been melted by her. Daddy and Mommy said they will take us for supper later. Her ignorance and innocence made him feel as if his heart had been melted by her. Unison. Okay. Su Qianxi snorted and poked her daughter's nose and moved closer to Li Mosen. Little rascal, what do you want to eat? Li Mosen's face turned red from his face to his ears. The basketball game bottom of his neck felt hot, and the six of them drove to the 24-hour stretched hot pot restaurant. When Li Jianwei approached the dishes were served, his body was so stiff that he strictly controlled the quantity and warned them not to eat too much. Li Jianwei didn't notice Li Mosen's stiffness at all. But when the four-quart hot pot was served, her eyes were attracted to the novelty she had discovered and accidentally exceeded their expectations. Stopped less than 2 centimeters in front of him. Seeing the dishes being served, she suddenly reached out and touched his eyebrow. Eat less, or you won't be able to sleep later. Why do you have a mole on your eyebrow? It's okay. Tomorrow is the weekend. Li Mosen only felt her fingers touching his face softly. Very excited. That soft touch made his heart palpitate. She took out her phone and took a beautiful photo. Li Mosen had never been so nervous before. Then she showed it to her brother, who was being strictly controlled by his grandparents what to do in front of his sister, whom he had been with for more than 10 years. Little son, meeting her gaze, Li Mosen suppressed the nervousness in his heart and said softly, Buddhist girl, I've had it for a long time. Seduce. It was just like liking you. Li Moyun. He didn't know when it started to appear, but one day, I want to eat he too. Suddenly realized its existence. Beautiful Buddhist girl, little son, I've been with you every day. Come on, Li Moyun's but I didn't notice. Growled as he looked at the picture with a curious expression. Qin Shuhua happened to hear it and asked it's all with because concern, your eyebrows are too hungry. Grandma will make supper for you. So close. The white-haired Li looked at her red lips and snorted, and his throat tightened. No, he's already so fat. He pushed her away unnaturally. We can't let him have supper. That you don't care about me. Li Moyun was on the verge of tears and said pitifully, Grandfather, I'm really hungry. Chapter 22:53. Li Xiao said mercilessly, Li Mosen smiled and reached out to touch her little nose. Look at your body. You only know how to quibble. Then, she looked at Qin Shuhua and said, then you didn't find it. It's all your fault. There is no if. Look at how handsome he used to be. But didn't I find it now? He looked like his father and mother at the same confidently. You fed him until he was deformed. And I saw it very clearly. During the conversation, even Li Jianwei herself did not realize that the distance between them was getting closer and closer. Ding dong. Li Mosen lowered his head and a bunch of pictures popped up. He subconsciously raised his hand and gently hugged her. Little son, Ursu, do you want to eat it? Yes. Come over. Li Jianwei did not feel anything super wrong. Delicious. There are 4 flavors. There was tomato hot pot, 3 delicacies hot pot, almost reflexively let go seafood hot pot. And Li Jianwei did not notice the speed of Li Mosen's movement. It's fragrant and tender. She turned to look at the door. Other than Li Jianwei stood up straight and walked toward the door. There were also the voices of his parents and the people around them. Who is it? Gulp. Open the door. Li Moyun swallowed his saliva. It was Li Jianqian's voice. Qin Shuhua's heart ached opened the door and said with a strange face, Oh, it's rare that my brother would come to my small room. If he doesn't eat, he'll be hungry. Had already taken a shower and was wearing dark blue pajamas and looked at his grandfather pitifully. His short black hair was half dry, Li Xiao put on his phoenix eyes were the same as Li Xiqing's. Look at you. He looked a little lazy. Are you really that hungry? He looked at his sister in front of him, continued to nod and muttered bitterly, for 10 years. I'm hungry. He did not know what expression he had on his face and looked inside. Give him a hardtack. Li Mosen had already walked out. Li Moyun screamed. When he saw it was Li Jianqian, Grandpa, he just looked away. Delicious food. Everyone was too familiar with each other, and they were used to all kinds of eye contact. He pointed the phone at Li Xiao's face and was actually looking for Li Mosen. She's too much. Mosen, is she still your biological sister? When she heard this, right at that moment, Li Jianwei sent another video over. She put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest. Yu Chulin, Li Mosen, she looked fierce and shouted, and Su Qianxi were all there. Why did you come to my room to look for Brother Mosen? In the middle of the video, there was a steaming hot pot. Beautiful, lovely, and kind sister. You could tell that it was the ultimate luxurious dish. I only have one sister. The
She
last
doesn't
scene
have the
was Li
description you
Jianhua
said,
turning the camera
Li
to
Jianxian
herself.
said with a face full of disgust.
She smacked her lips at the camera
He
and
reached
smacked
out
her
and
lips.
gently pushed her away.
Li Xiao smiled
Get
and
out
said,
of the way.
Why is our Ursu so
Li
good-looking?
Jianhua stood in front of Mosen
Li
angrily.
Moyun was speechless.
Don't go. What kind of focus
Brother
was
doesn't
that?
know how to talk at all.
Qin Shuhua
I
also
won't let
came
him
over
go.
and watched the video again.
Okay.
She
You are
smiled
naive.
and said,
You are cute.
Yes,
Go
away.
Ursu is really good-looking.
Li Daisu.
She's the prettiest
Li
among the three
Jianxian glanced at
children.
Mosen and then
Li
turned to
Xiao
leave.
felt the same way and
Li
nodded.
Mosen gently placed his
He
hand
looked
on
at
Li
Li Jianhua's
Jianhua's
shoulder
shoulder
and
even
quickly
more
said,
disappointed.
I'll go for a while.
Look at what you're feeding
Li
him.
Jianhua was furious.
Is he a pig?
But she also knew that if Li
Li
Jianxian
Maju
had
was
nothing to
speechless.
do, he would not come
Li
to the
Xiao
room
finally
to look for
announced
Mosen.
his death sentence.
But what could it be?
Give him a hardtack and
Li
prepare
Jianhua's
vegetarian
eyes darted
food for
around
school
as she
on
quietly
Monday.
followed behind them.
He's not allowed to
As
eat
for
meat
Li
for a month.
Jianxian, when he brought Li
Li
Mosen
Moyun
into his
cried
room,
sadly.
he inadvertently
Grandpa, why
raised
do you
his head and
despise
found
me
Li
so
Jianhua,
much?
who was trying to
Am
eavesdrop.
I an orphan?
Without batting an
Grandma,
eyelid, Li Jianxian
I don't want to be a
said,
vegetarian.
Mosen, you go in first.
I don't want to eat hardtack.
Of course, Li Mosen
Qin
also
Shuhua's
knew that
heart
Li
ached for Li
Jianhua was
Moyun,
behind them.
but when she saw how fat
he
Li
couldn't help
Moyun
but
was,
smile when
she
he
saw
sighed
the
and
little
said,
head that was
Hey,
trying hard to
listen
hide
to
in
your
the corner
grandfather.
but still revealed some clues.
Be good.
Li Moyun was in despair.
Before Li Jianxian entered
Under
the
Li
door,
Xiao's angry
he said in
glare,
a voice that
he
was
held
neither
a piece
too
of
loud nor
hardtack and
too
a glass
soft.
of water
It
and
seems
bitterly
that Granny
swallowed the
Rome
food
made
with
some
tears
sweet
in his
water
eyes.
and left it in the kitchen.
He looked at the
Let's go
delicious
have
food
some
that Li
later.
Jianhua had sent on the
Li
screen with
Jianhua's
envy and
ears
jealousy.
twitched.
Qin
Sugar
Shuhua's
water.
heart ached, but when she
Just
saw
as she
the
was
scene,
wondering when
she
Granny
couldn't
Rome
help but
made the
think it
sugar
was
water.
funny. The next moment,
She took
she
out her
heard the
phone
sound
and
of Li
secretly
Jianxian
recorded a
closing
short
the door.
video to post on WeChat.
Not only did he close the door,
When Li
he
Jianhua saw
actually
it,
locked it.
she laughed out loud and enthusiastically sent a video to Li Moyun. It was
Chapter
a live
2254.
Li Moyun
When she
cried
reached
out
the
and
kitchen,
roared with
Li
tears in his
Jianhua
eyes,
realized that
"Get
she had been
lost."
tricked by Li Jianxian. On the
Li
other
Jianhua
hand,
stomped
the
her
room
feet in
burst into
anger,
laughter.
but there was nothing she could do.
Li Moyun decisively
On
hung
the
up
other
the phone
side,
and cried in his bed.
Li Jianxian closed
Li
the door
Jianhua's
and
evil
turned to look
plan
at
had
Mosen.
succeeded.
What did
She
Dad
naturally
say to
put
you
her
when he asked
chopsticks
you to
into
go
Li
to the
Mosen's
study?
dipping sauce and picked
About
up a piece of
college.
meat that he had put down
Li
just a
Jianxian
second ago.
nodded as if he had expected
She
it.
happily put it into her
I
mouth
knew that
and
Dad
smacked
wouldn't
her
allow
lips.
you to go to Kingstown
It's
University.
so delicious. I guess Dad
Lazy
would ask you to
bum,
go
Li
to
Mosen
Capital
muttered.
University or New York University. He wants me to go
Chapter
to New York
2244.
Business School. That's
Li
within my
Jianhua
expectations.
didn't think there was anything wrong with it.
Li Jianxian's face
She
was
happily
full of
picked
relief.
up Li Mosen's food with
Because
her
I've already
chopsticks.
made it clear to Dad that I don't
Suddenly,
want to go
Li
home
Mosen
to do business.
threw a piece of tripe into the bowl.
I just want to study hard
Li
and develop
Jianhua
in my
said,
current professional
"Hey,
field.
I don't want to eat this."
When did you tell Dad?
Li Mosen continued to
I
heat
told
the
him a
food.
long time ago.
When he heard this,
Maybe 2
he
years
deliberately
ago.
said, "It's not
3
for
years
you."
ago.
Then don't
What
put it
reaction
here.
did he have?
It smells.
Li Jianxian shrugged. That's my bowl. What reaction?
Li Mosen deliberately
He didn't
glanced
have
at
any
her.
reaction at all.
Your bowl is over there.
Li Mosen found it a little hard to believe.
What's yours is mine.
What kind of reaction
Yours
is that?
is mine. He just
Li
said,
Jianhua
I got
smiled
it,
and
that
added
was
the
it.
tripe.
Li
She
Mosen
dipped it in the
frowned.
sauce and sent it to his
Li
mouth.
Xiqing was different from others.
Li Mosen
The Li
smiled
Corporation
and opened
was
his
a
mouth.
huge enterprise.
He
and
ate
it was
the
all
tripe
built
and
by
then
Li
put the
Xiqing
freshly
alone.
cooked food into the bowl.
Other than the 4 years
Li
when he was
Jianhua's
away,
hands were
there was
nimble.
absolutely no one else
She
to
put
make
the
it what it
food
was
in her
now.
mouth as fast as she could.
But now,
Li Xiqing did
suddenly,
not force Li
she
Jianxian
saw that the
to
waiter
learn
had
business,
served her favorite
but
shrimp
instead asked
paste.
the son of his enemy to
She
learn it.
immediately tugged at Li
What
Mosen
did that
and
mean?
mumbled,
Brother Mosen,
Li Mosen's
I want
heart
to
beat
eat that.
faster, and the ideas
Li
in his
Jianxian
mind
couldn't
became
stand
more
it
and more
anymore.
daring. You
Could
only
it be
care
that
about
Li Xiqing
yourself.
wanted him to inherit the family
Mosen
business?
hasn't eaten much.
This idea that
Didn't
Li
I
Mosen
just
had
feed
never
him a
even
bite?
dared to think about popped
Li
up here.
Jianhua said righteously.
It was simply crazy.
I saw him eat a few
Li
bites.
Mosen suppressed the terrible speculation in
Su
his heart
also
and
looked
looked
at her
Li
daughter.
Jianxian. Don't bully
What
your
does he
brother.
mean? No,
Can't you tell what
Li
he means?
Jianhua ate and picked up the
Li
meatballs in the
Jianxian
bowl.
laughed.
Brother
He told me
Mosen
to
likes
study
to cook
hard
hot
and
pot
to
for
develop
me.
in my own field.
He's not
The
like that
family
guy.
business is a small matter.
He never cooks for me.
He can still manage it now.
Fake brother.
When he can't
Li
manage it
Jianxian
anymore,
laughed.
there will always be someone
you have
who
the
can
nerve
take
to
over.
say that.
After a
Isn't
pause,
it because you like
Li
to stick to
Jianxian saw
Mosen?
the disbelief on Li
Think
Mosen's
about it.
face and teased.
Have
Anyway,
you ever cared about
he wants
me?
you to learn business.
That's because you don't care
You
about
are also
me.
his son.
son, so there's
Only
nothing
Brother
wrong with
Mosen
letting
cares
you
about
learn
me,
business, so I don't
right?
care about you.
I'm just a
Li
foster
Jianrui
son.
said angrily.
An adopted son
Brother
is still
Mosen
a
is the
son.
best.
Li
You
Jianqian
are
patted
all
him on the
bad.
shoulder.
Mom,
Keep
you
it
eat
up.
too.
It's not
Li
easy for
Jianrui
Dad to get
scooped
to
up
where
a
he is
piece of
today.
freshly cooked shrimp paste
Don't
and
let it
put
fall
in
in your
Su
hands
Chanzi's
in the
bowl.
future.
Brother Mosen was quiet for a moment, and his mood was a little complicated. His blue eyes quietly This complicated feeling lasted for a long time. Brother Mosen is delicious. When he returned to his room, washed clearly, and went to bed, his head was full of what Li Jianxian had just said. Li Jianxian took advantage of the loophole in her words. Li Mosen didn't really want these things. Li Jianxian then realized what she had said and said that such a huge family business should be inherited by his own son. If you can cook for me, I will also say that your cooking is delicious. Forget it. Moreover, this adopted son was the son of his enemy, a bastard whose biological father was unknown. Li Mosen stared at the ceiling in the dark. Mosen, Don me. He didn't know how long it had been, but he still didn't feel sleepy. Li Jianwei continued to eat happily. When he woke up the next day, Li Mosen the dark circles under his eyes were particularly obvious on his fair face. At least leave a few mouthfuls for me. Yeah, I'm full. Chapter 22. Li drank a cup of sour plum juice and was satisfied. Was a little surprised. Ah, it's so delicious. She looked at Li Mosen and asked, Brother Mosen, couldn't help smiling and said, you only know how to bully your brother softly and turned his face away. Yu Chulin had been a man of few words from the beginning until the end. Saw him like this and when immediately leaned over. He subconsciously looked up at Li Mosen. Is it because Daddy scolded you last night that you couldn't sleep? Who had also been silent. Li Mosen looked down at her. At this time, Li Jianwei was eating with his eyes down, putting everything in the bowl between him and Su Qianxi. Daddy scolded you for your own good. His eyes were dark. Daddy doesn't usually scold people. No one knew what he was thinking. Look, Daddy has never scolded me. Li Jianwei accidentally ate you're too stupid. There's no use scolding Mosen's arm and walked with difficulty. Li Jianxian's melodious voice sounded with a hint of mockery. Are you proud of yourself? Li Jianwei puffed up her cheeks and said angrily, no way. Are you jealous? I'm not. Li Jianxian walked over and lifted his hand to clamp Li Jianwei under his armpit. Let's go eat. Hey, let go. You smell like a fox. I'll squash you if you spout nonsense again. I'm not spouting nonsense. Smell it yourself. Li Jianxian laughed angrily and pressed her head further under his armpit. Help me smell it. Wretch. Li Jianwei pretended to vomit, but she still couldn't escape the situation of being carried by Li Jianxian. The 17-year-old Li Jianxian was more than 1.7 meters tall. Coupled with his regular exercise, it was effortless for him to carry the petite Li Jianwei. In the end, Li Jianxian ended up at the dining table. When she turned around and saw Yu Chulin walking over slowly, she shouted, Brother Chu, quickly control my brother. He's starting to bully me again. Yu Chulin sat down casually and chuckled. Really? Why didn't I see it? Sob sob sob, you're in cahoots. You're all bullying me. Li Jianwei cried. When she saw Li Mosen walking over from behind, she said, Brother Mosen, sob sob. Li Mosen's lips curled up. He reached out and tapped her nose. All right, with your acting skills, you can be an actress. Where do you want to go later? Li Jianwei tilted her head and suddenly thought of a place. Let's go to the amusement park we went to last time, okay? Amusement park. Yeah, it's the one with the Ferris wheel and the one with the Kumamon bear selling rabbit ears. Li Jianwei's eyes sparkled. We went there in the evening. Wouldn't it be more fun during the day? Li Mosen frowned. Of course, he knew that place. He also remembered the Kumamon bear that sold rabbit ears the last time he saw it. However, the way that the Kumamon bear looked at them did not seem normal. It was as if he had other emotions, as if he knew them. Li Mosen didn't like that feeling very much. However, seeing that Li Jianwei was so interested, Li Mosen couldn't bear to reject her. After hesitating for a moment, he suggested, I know a similar place. Shall we go somewhere else? Li Jianwei shook her head. I think that place is very good. It's close to home and we can eat hot pot. When we're done, we can go and eat hot pot. Speaking of hot pot, Li Jianwei was almost drooling. Unlike the rest of the family, Li Jianwei really liked eating hot pot. She was almost obsessed with it. In addition, there was also ice cream and all kinds of fried snacks. She liked all of them very much. Chapter 22:56. Of course not. He was fed by Grandpa and Grandma. I didn't ask them to feed him. Granny Roang's cooking is nutritionally balanced. Nanny Roang, who was busy at the side, smiled when she heard Li Jianyue's words. She was very pleased. She had been in the Li family for so many years and had long regarded these children as her own grandchildren. Nanny Roang was naturally very happy to be praised by them. However, she still said, "Let's talk about this here. Don't say things like that in front of Moyun. Otherwise, he will be in a bad mood. Granny Roang, we have to talk to him more so that he can actively lose weight. Otherwise, if he continues to gain weight like this, he will be ruined," Li Jianyue said firmly. Just as they were talking, the doorbell rang. Nanny Roang quickly went to open the door. It was Li Moyun. Li Moyun's expression was a little tragic at this time. He moved his fat body in and opened his hands to the sky. He shouted loudly, "I, Li Han-san, am back again." "Hey, who is Li Han-san?" Li Jianyue turned to look at Li Mosin while eating breakfast. "I don't know Li Han-san." "Brother Mosin, quickly chase him away." "Hey," Li Moyun said angrily. "Li Ursu, don't go too far. I haven't settled the score with you for live streaming Hotpot last night." "What score?" "I just felt sorry for you at home, so I wanted to share it with you." Li Moyun said angrily. "You still dare to say that? I was hungry all night because of you. Look at my dark circles, dark circles." Li Moyun pried his eyelids open and moved closer to her. "How pitiful. Such dark circles are all your fault. Wow, you really have dark circles. But if you were hungry, wouldn't you have asked Grandpa and Grandma to cook for you? You still dare to say that?" Li Moyun was about to cry. "It's all because of you. Grandpa and Grandma started to think that I was fat when they saw how thin you were. They said that I was like a pig and forced me to lose weight. From now on, I'm not allowed to have meat for lunch. I can only eat vegetables every day. What have I done?" "Then you were hungry all night?" Yu Chulin suddenly asked. Li Moyun felt even worse. "I was so hungry that I couldn't take it anymore, so Grandpa gave me a piece of hardtack, ha 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 ha." Li Jianyue laughed out loud. "This is too tragic. Ha 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 ha." The corners of Li Mosin's lips curled up. Li Jianqian replied, "It's only right. Grandpa and Grandma were right. Given your physique, if you continue to gain weight, it'll be difficult to lose weight in the future. It's hard to reduce it now." "That's true." Li Moyun felt that the whole world was against him. He sat down at the dining table dejectedly. Was it his fault that he was fat? Did he want to be fat? He didn't want to, okay. It was his grandparents who had fed him to make him fat, but in the end, he was despised by them. The more Li Moyun thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. He grabbed a piece of bread and started munching on it. However, Yu Chulin grabbed her hand before she could bite him. Li Moyun was stunned for a moment. However, Yu Chulin had a teasing look on his face as he asked with a smile, "Didn't you eat before you came?" Of course, Li Moyun ate it. However, he only ate 2 steamed buns, a cup of soy milk, and a fried dough stick. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Although he wasn't hungry at the moment, he was sure that his stomach would be growling in less than an hour. Chapter 22:57. How is that possible? Grandma wouldn't have let him out if he hadn't eaten. "Brother Chu, he's lying to you," Li Jianyue shouted from behind. Yu Chulin looked at Li Moyun's expression and removed his hand. "Aren't we going out to play later?" Don't fill your stomach after eating. Let's go to the buffet later. Lee Moyun's eyes lit up and he quickly nodded his head. He retracted his hand and said honestly, actually, I've already eaten. I'll go on an empty stomach so that I can eat more when we go to the buffet later. Ha! Yu Chulin smiled faintly. Li Jianxian reached out and patted his shoulder gently. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. After breakfast, Li Moyun eagerly caught up with Li Jianyue and Li Mosin. However, when he turned around, he realized that Li Jianxian and Yu Chulin were not with him. He asked Li Mosin in confusion, "Where are brother Chu and second brother?" The eldest brother was Li Mosin, so the second brother was naturally Li Jianxian. Li Mosin looked at him and answered honestly, "I don't know." Li Moyun felt that something was wrong. "Didn't you say that you were going to the buffet together?" "Did we?" Li Mosin looked at him with a faint smile. "Ursu and I were going to play. Chu and Daisu are the ones going to the buffet." "Did you hear wrongly?" Li Moyun was stunned. "Wait, what? You're not going together? Who told you that?" Li Jianyue laughed. "Let's go. I'll take you out to play." "Hey, I don't want to. I want to go to the buffet." "Your buffet is long gone." Li Mosin looked at him sympathetically. "It seems that Daisu and Chu are going to visit a professor's house today. They even brought gifts. They might have lunch at the professor's house. If it's a buffet, it'll be at least in the evening." Li Moyun's heart was filled with anger at being deceived. He shouted, "That's too much. I didn't expect brother Chu to be such a person. Ursu, let's go." "What did you call me?" Li Jianyue raised her eyebrows and put on airs. When Li Moyun saw this, he immediately smiled apologetically and said, "Sister, my dear sister, where are you planning to go?" Humph, Li Jianyue enjoyed the feeling of being called sister. Although Li Moyun often thought that she was stupid and didn't want to call her sister at all. But now that he was called out, he felt light in his heart. He said proudly, "To the amusement park." "Ha!" Li Moyun was a little disappointed. "Why is it an amusement park again? Aren't you sick of going there every day?" "I don't go every day. I rarely go, okay?" Li Jianyue reached out and patted him. "Are you going?" "Go." The three siblings soon arrived at the amusement park that Li Jianyue had been longing for. The amusement park had been quietly renovated. Compared to the last time Li Jianyue saw it, some places seemed to have changed. There were many more dolls around. In addition to the Kumaman, there was also a Pikachu, Whitey, and a giant doll that Li Jianyue had seen before but couldn't name. Because it was the weekend, there were many children around. They surrounded the big dolls, holding lollipops and ice cream in their hands. They chased each other and laughed happily. Almost subconsciously, Li Jianyue's eyes fell on the Kumaman as soon as she entered. Chapter 2258. Li Jianyue looked at the big stupid bear and blinked her eyes. She wanted to go forward to greet it, but she was afraid of mistaking it for someone else. Li Mosin noticed her gaze and his eyes darkened. He put his hand on her shoulder and asked, "What are you looking at?" "I'm looking for," Li Moyun suddenly shouted from behind, "I want to eat ice cream." "No, it's the easiest to put on weight." Li Jianyue nudged Li Mosin and said, "Hurry up and pull Moyun back. If he continues to eat, he will become fat." Li Mosin raised his hand and put it around her neck. Then, he walked towards the chubby Li Moyun and said, "You can eat it later. We just finished dinner. How are you going to eat the buffet if you eat ice cream now?" When Li Moyun heard the word buffet, he suddenly became energetic and said, "Buffet." Li Jianyue blinked her eyes. If it was a buffet, wouldn't Li Moyun eat even more? How could he lose weight if he continued to eat like this? But then, Li Jianyue received a look from Li Mosen. Li Jianyue understood and immediately felt some sympathy for Li Moyun. At this time, Li Moyun was still immersed in the surprise of the buffet. He was still excitedly thinking about which restaurant to eat at. The meat would be better and the desserts would be more suitable. Thinking about it made him drool and his stomach shrink. Li Moyun decided to digest it first. On the other side, Li Mosen looked at Li Jianyue and asked, "What are you looking for just now?" "Oh, I'm looking for my classmate. He works here part-time and comes to work every day after school to earn money." Li Jianyue's big eyes fell on the crowd in front of her again. Her eyes moved to the Kumamon bear again. "Do you remember that bear? I bought kitten ears from him last time." Of course, Li Mosen remembered. The last time he came here, he remembered that the Kumamon had been looking at them. It was either looking at Li Jianyue or him. Li Mosen was very sensitive to people's gazes. At this moment, he looked at the Kumamon and narrowed his eyes. At this time, the Kumamon Kun was swaying, looking charmingly naive. It was surrounded by children, holding a handful of balloons and small toys in its hands. It sent them out one by one, and after the parents scanned the QR code, it waved to the children. The children were very happy. After waving goodbye to the Kumamon, they quickly grabbed the balloons and walked away. However, after the first wave of children left, a new wave of children surrounded it. The Kumamon Kun was very busy. Li Jianyue looked at the busy doll and said, "I don't know if it's him. I can't see his face and the things he's selling are different from the last time. He looks really busy." Li Mosen pursed his lips. "Are you on good terms with him?" "I didn't like him at first. I thought that he was a delinquent. He didn't do well in school and liked to doze off in class. He always looked like he hadn't woken up all day. But a few days ago, I finally found out that he didn't sleep enough because he wanted to earn money. His father didn't give him pocket money because of his stepmother. His father also didn't allow him to draw. In fact, his drawings are very good. Let me show you." Li Jianyue turned her head to look at Li Mosen and blinked. "I didn't like him at first." Li Jianyue had removed Quan Jingyi's WeChat from the blacklist. Quan Jingyi had even sent her a few portraits. Chapter 2259. Seeing the surprise on Li Mosen's face, Li Jianyue was a little happy and asked, "I didn't lie to you, did I? It's really great." Li Jianyue's expression was a little proud, as if it was something worth showing off. Seeing this, Li Mosen unconsciously tightened his lips, and a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes. Not far away, the Kumamon was surrounded by children all the time, collecting money from time to time, handing over the QR code, and then taking small gifts. There was no free time at all. It seemed that the Kumamon didn't notice them at all and didn't even look at them. There were so many part-time people every day, so it was not a coincidence that Quan Jingyi was here today. But even so, Li Mosen still felt very uncomfortable in his heart. He put his arm around Li Jianyue's shoulder and moved her eyes away invisibly. He said calmly, "There are too many people here. Let's go and play something else." Li Jianyue looked at the Kumamon and saw that it really didn't seem to have time to talk to her at all. Then she nodded and said, "Well, let's see if he is my classmate later." Li Mosen's lips tightened. He didn't say anything and turned around. Li Moyun saw something fun and shouted from afar, "Brother Mosen, Ursu, come quickly. Let's line up here. If we wait any longer, there will be more people." Because there were many people on the weekend, there were a lot of people waiting in line in the amusement park. Li Jianyue also knew that there were fewer people at this time, so she quickly ran to Li Moyun and shouted, "Coming." Then she suddenly stopped and turned to Mosen and said, "Brother Mosen, I want to eat ice cream." It was near noon, and the sun was getting more and more scorching. At this moment, Mosen also felt a little cold, so he nodded. Then Li Jianhua turned around and ran to her brother to line up, and soon she was behind Li Moyun. Li Mosen withdrew his gaze from Li Jianhua's back, and then his eyes fell on the Kumaman again. The Kumaman seemed to be finally busy. After sending away the last batch of children, it had a moment of respite. It touched its full pockets with satisfaction. When it turned around, it seemed to see Li Mosen and paused for a moment. Then, it spread out its hands and pointed to a pile of little things in front of it, as if asking. Li Mosen shook his head slightly and quickly turned to leave. After buying 3 ice creams, Li Jianhua and Li Moyun had already lined up inside. When they saw Li Mosen coming over, the two of them quickly waved at him. After apologizing to the people around them and greeting them, they let Li Mosen cut the line and come in. She ate the ice cream contentedly. Suddenly, Li Jianhua's phone vibrated. He picked it up. It was WeChat. Quan Jingyi, you're at the amusement park. Li Mosen took advantage of his height to take a look. When he saw Quan Jingyi's name, his mood was already terrible. Li Moyun was a little taller than Li Jianhua. When he saw the name and the content of the message, he immediately screamed, "Hey, who is this?" "Li Ersu, are you in love?" Li Jianhua replied, "How is that possible? They're just classmates. Don't you have female classmates too? That's different. Does he want to chase you?" Chapter 2260. Romance Chinese Network. The latest chapter of the 99th divorce was updated as soon as possible. Why not? After saying that, Li Jianhua lowered her head and quickly replied to Quan Jingyao, "Yes, where are you? I don't see you." Before the message could be sent, the phone had been taken away from her hand. Li Mosen calmly put her phone into his pocket and said to Li Moyun, "Don't bring your phone with you when you play the game. Give me your phone." Li Moyun was surprised and said, "Brother Mosen, aren't you going in with us?" Li Mosen looked up at the roller coaster and said, "I'm afraid of heights." "Liar." Thinking of the last time, Li Jianhua immediately said, "We played this together last time." After saying that, she pouted and looked up at him in disbelief. "Do you not want to play with us anymore?" Li Moyun pursed his lips and smiled. He rubbed the top of her head and said, "No, go quickly. The staff is urging us." The staff was indeed urging them. Li Moyun couldn't wait to shove the phone into Li Mosen's hand and grab Li Jianhua's arm. "Ersu, go quickly. Let Brother Mosen accompany us in the next project." Li Jianhua was dragged into the roller coaster by Li Moyun. At first, she was still concerned about Mosen. After sitting on the roller coaster, she and Li Moyun were so excited that they forgot everything else. The roller coaster was accompanied by the screams of young men and women as it passed in front of Li Mosen. The phone in his hand suddenly vibrated again. Li Mosen clicked on Li Jianhua's phone and saw that it was another message from Quan Jingyi. "Quan Jingyi, where are you now? I'm done with my work. I'll go find you." Looking at Quan Jingyi's WeChat profile picture, Li Mosen's gaze became more and more gloomy. He clenched the phone in his hand and thought for a moment. He imitated Li Jianhua's tone and replied, "I want to accompany my brother. I don't want to play with you." After sending it, he immediately deleted the message and only left the message that Quan Jingyi had sent previously. He didn't know if he was really hurt by this message. Quan Jingyi didn't reply to Li Jianhua's message even after they finished playing. Although Li Moyun was fat, deep down, he was a lively little fatty who liked excitement. After playing the roller coaster, he couldn't wait to drag Li Jianhua and Li Mosen to play other exciting projects. Looking at the happy Li Jianhua, Li Mosen was in a good mood and accompanied the two of them to play the next game. By noon, Li Moyun's interest was completely taken away by the food and he made a fuss about going to the buffet. Li Mosen took the two of them to the restaurant in the amusement park. Since it was the weekend, the restaurant was full of people. Moreover, the buffet that Lee Moyun had been longing for wasn't here. When he saw the restaurant, Lee Moyun immediately grabbed Lee Ursu and Lee Mosun's hands and shouted, "Oh, where's the buffet? Big whore." Lee Jianyue was indignant. She put her hands on her hips and said, "I'll eat this today." Lee Moyun was exasperated. "But you promised to have a buffet this morning." Lee Jianyue giggled as she took a step forward and said, "I didn't promise you anything." Lee Moyun was dumbfounded and suddenly remembered that it was Lee Jianxian who had promised to have a buffet with him. Lee Moyun instantly felt as if he had been cheated. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He turned to look at Lee Mosun and cried out, "Brother Mosun." Lee Mosun said seriously, "If we go out now, we'll have to buy another ticket to come in." "Ah, I don't want to." Lee Moyun was about to cry. "I want to eat a buffet." Lee Moyun. Lee Jianyue rarely put on the airs of an older sister. "If you continue eating, you'll really become fat like a pig." Lee Mosun ignored Lee Moyun's opinion and turned to line up in front to get a number. There were many people in the queue. When Lee Mosun got the number, there were already more than 10 tables in front of them even if he came early. When he came back with the number, he didn't know when, but there was a tall young man beside Lee Jianyue. Chapter 2261. Romance Chinese Network. The latest chapter of the 99th divorce was updated as soon as possible. Looking at the young man's back, Lee Mosun immediately felt a sense of crisis. It was an indescribable feeling, as if his treasure was being coveted. Lee Mosun hid the expression on his face and walked forward silently. When he walked in front of her, he saw Lee Jianyue looking very excited. She tilted her head and gestured with her hands to pretend to be a bunny. Her big black eyes were clear and pure, and her fair and tender face looked very cute. Quan Jingyi, who was standing in front of her, stared at her with a slightly roguish smile on his face. Lee Mosun could empathize with that kind of look. It was the look of being attracted to the opposite sex. "Brother Mosun, you're back." Lee Moyun, who was standing at the side, saw him first and waved at him. Lee Jianyue and Quan Jingyi also turned to look at him. Lee Mosun pursed his lips and smiled faintly. He looked at Quan Jingyi. And the latter was also looking at him with a sizing gaze. "Brother Mosun, what did you order?" Lee Jianyue turned around and ran to his side. She grabbed his arm and looked at the receipt. She shouted proudly, "Haha, it's all my favorite food." Lee Moyun bellowed angrily, "I'll never hang out with scammers again." Lee Jianyue smiled indifferently and said, "Brother Mosun only ordered 3 servings. If you don't eat, then let Quan Jingyi eat." In front of a foodie, snatching food from others was like killing his parents. Lee Moyun immediately looked at Quan Jingyi warily. Quan Jingyi put his hands in his trouser pockets and raised his eyebrows slightly. He said very cooperatively, "I have no objection." "No." Lee Moyun immediately hugged Lee Mosun's arm and shouted, "Who said I don't want to eat?" "Brother Mosun, I want to eat the biggest portion." Lee Jianyue hugged her arms and snorted, "Quan Jingyi has already promised to have lunch with us. There's no more for you." Hearing Lee Jianyue's words, Lee Mosun frowned slightly unconsciously. He glanced coldly at Quan Jingyi, who had no intention of leaving. He put his arm around Lee Jianyue's shoulder as if nothing had happened. "Let's go and find a seat first." Lee Jianyue raised her head and looked at him. "Brother Mosun, I invited a classmate to eat with us. Can you order another meal?" Lee Mosun said calmly, "I ordered a lot. It's enough to eat. If it's not enough, I'll order more." The 4 of them were led to the lounge area by the waiter. Lee Jianyue excitedly pulled a stool over to Quan Jingyi. She asked curiously, "Can you bring me along for a part-time job?" Quan Jingyi asked. Looking at her clear and expectant eyes, Quan Jingyi felt as if his heart was being brushed by a feather. The words of rejection were stuck in his throat. At this time, Li Mosen suddenly interrupted, "You want to do a part-time job here?" Li Jianyue turned around and nodded excitedly. "I want to experience it too." It's very interesting to hear Quan Jingyi talk about it. No. Li Mosen took a sip of water and said faintly, "Dad and Mom won't agree." Although Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi did not spoil their children, they would not allow Li Jianyue to experience social life so early. After all, they had to focus on learning now. There would be opportunities in the future for social practice. Li Jianyue pouted unhappily. Li Mosen poured a glass of water and handed it to her. He coaxed, "I'll bring you along during the holidays. Dad won't refuse." This kind of interest was temporary. After a period of time, it would naturally be forgotten. Chapter 2262. Romance Chinese Network. The latest chapter of the 99th divorce was updated as soon as possible. "I'm just experiencing it." Quan Jingyi sat lazily on the chair with a beautiful smile. "I'll take you there after dinner. There's a Pikachu set with the tour guide." "Wow, really? I like Pikachu very much." Li Jianrui immediately felt as if a switch had been turned on. She was overflowing with joy. She leaned on the table and leaned toward Quan Jingyi. "Can I wear the extra set?" Quan Jingyi nodded. "Sure." Li Jianrui was so happy that she was about to fly. She smiled brightly at Quan Jingyi and said, "That's great. You're so nice." Quan Jingyi raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled playfully. "You're saying that I'm nice now? What will you do when you know I'm nicer in the future?" Li Jianrui didn't notice the deeper meaning in Quan Jingyi's words and blurted out, "Then I'll be nicer to you too." "Really?" Li Jianrui nodded seriously. "Of course." As soon as she finished speaking, there was a harsh sound of a chair rubbing against each other. Li Mosen suddenly stood up and said with a bad expression, "Ursu, you have time now. Come with me to order some food for your classmate." Li Jianrui looked back at him in confusion. She also stood up and said, "Didn't you just say?" Before she could finish speaking, Li Mosen took her hand and left. Quan Jingyi sat up straight. When he was about to pick up a glass of water, he suddenly found that the little fatty next to him was looking at him inquisitively. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Quan Jingyi asked directly. Li Moyun looked at him and then at the two who had left. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. Why did he feel that something was wrong? Li Moyun scratched his forehead and glanced at Quan Jingyi next to him again. He suddenly felt enlightened and pursed his lips. It must be because of this boy. The way this boy looked at Ursu and the way he spoke just now showed that he was not a decent person. Ursu was so stupid that she didn't even realize that she was being teased by Quan Jingyi. Brother Mosen must have taken Ursu to a place where there was no one to educate her. With this thought in mind, Li Moyun held the cup of water and looked at Quan Jingyi meaningfully. He asked, "How is your relationship with my sister?" Quan Jingyi's attitude was calm. He said calmly, "Not bad." "Which aspect is fine?" Quan Jingyi looked over and asked, "Which aspect do you want it to be?" Other than Li Jianrui, Li Moyun and Li Mosen did not have a good time at the amusement park. Needless to say, Li Moyun was still brooding over the fact that he had been cheated. When he came out of the amusement park, he swore that he would never go out with Ursu and Li Mosen again. Li Mosen didn't show his unhappiness on the surface, but he became a little quiet when he got home and didn't eat much at dinner. At night, when Li Mosen was reading in his bedroom, there was a knock on the door. He turned back to look. Li Jianrui secretly raised her eyebrows and poked half of her head out. She sweetly called out, "Brother Mosen." Then, she pushed the door open and walked in with a bowl of supper. Li Mosen turned back to continue reading and asked, "What's the matter?" Li Jianhua put the supper on the table and pulled a stool to sit next to him. She held her face and said, "You didn't eat much at night. I specially asked Auntie Rong to make supper for you." Chapter 2263. As soon as she finished speaking, Li Mosen's face darkened. Li Jianhua was frightened by his sudden change of expression and shrank her neck. She stuck out her tongue and didn't realize what she said wrong. "What's wrong? He's really a good person, but his behavior is sometimes." "Hey, Brother Mosen, where are you going?" "Wait for me." Li Mosen clenched his fists and didn't want to hear her say anything about Quan Jingyi. He turned around and left with a gloomy face. Except for Li Jianhua, Li Moyun and Li Mosen didn't have a good time at the amusement park. Needless to say, Li Moyun was still brooding about being cheated. When he came out of the amusement park, he still swore that he would never go out with Ursu and Li Mosen again. Li Mosen didn't show his unhappiness on the surface. He just became a little quiet when he got home and didn't eat much at dinner. At night, when Li Mosen was reading in the bedroom, there was a knock on the door. He turned back to look. Li Jianhua secretly raised her eyebrows and poked half of her head out. She sweetly called out, "Brother Mosen." Then, she pushed the door open and walked in with a bowl of supper. Li Mosen turned back to continue reading and asked, "What's the matter?" Li Jianhua put the supper on the table and pulled a stool to sit next to him. She held her little face and said, "You didn't eat much at night. I specially asked Auntie Rong to make supper for you." Although she didn't know why Brother Mosen suddenly became so angry at the amusement park at noon, she also understood that Brother Mosen was angry because of her. He was so angry that he didn't eat dinner, so he specially asked Auntie Rong to make supper for him and personally brought it over. Li Mosen grunted without looking up and continued to read his book. He had no intention of paying any attention to her. Li Jianhua blinked and pulled the stool closer to him. "I asked Granny Rong to make your favorite wonton. If you don't eat it, I'm going to give it to Mo Yun to eat." "Okay." Li Mosen continued to flip through the book in his hand and said perfunctorily, "Well, I'm not hungry. You go and give it to Mo Yun. You are condoning Mo Yun to commit crimes." Li Jianhua grabbed his arm and leaned over. "Brother Mosen, what book are you reading? It's so interesting." From the moment she came in, Li Mosen's attention was not on the book at all. When he heard her question, he turned to look at the contents of the book. Noticing that there were some unhealthy sentences in the book, he slammed the book shut. Ordinary extracurricular books. After saying that, he reached out and picked up the supper. Seeing that he was finally willing to eat supper, Li Jianhua tactfully stood up. She clasped her hands behind her back and looked around Li Mosen's room like a cadre visiting the countryside. Li Mosen's room was like him. It was low-key and simple. There was not much decoration, but the arrangement of things was just right. Li Jianhua leaned in front of his cabinet and looked at the figurines inside. She said, "Brother Mosen, don't be angry with me, okay? If you're angry and don't eat, I'll be sad too. When I go to the amusement park in the future, I won't only care about myself and forget about Brother Mosen." The words spoken in a sweet voice were tactful and pleasant. Her casual words were like the charming fragrance of wine, seeping into the heart and spleen. Li Mosen used the spoon to drink 2 mouthfuls of soup and couldn't eat anymore. He wanted to read the latest chapter of 99th Divorce Claw Book House for free. Chapter 2264. Romance Chinese Network. The latest chapter of the 99th Divorce was updated as soon as possible. Li Mosen drank 2 mouthfuls of soup with the spoon and couldn't eat anymore. The little girl's incessant coaxing really made him unable to be angry. Li Jianhua thought carefully for a whole night and only found this mistake that made Li Mosen unhappy. She shouldn't have been so focused on her own happiness that she forgot about Li Mosen. After saying this, she remembered that at noon, when she asked Li Mosen if he didn't like Quan Jingyi, Li Mosen's unfathomable look, so she continued, "Brother Mosen, Quan Jingyi is my friend now. He is actually a really good person." Before she could finish speaking, her arm was suddenly grabbed by someone behind her. The person behind her grabbed her arm and pressed her against the wall. His handsome and chiseled face suddenly appeared in front of her. His pitch-black eyes stared at her with suppressed emotions. Li Jianhua looked at Li Mosen with her eyes wide open. She forgot what she wanted to say and forgot to move. The girl's white and tender skin was as delicate as a porcelain doll, and her big black eyes looked at him without blinking. Her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Li Mosen's heart suddenly softened. He lowered his eyes slightly, and his gaze fell on the pink and full little mouth, and his slightly raised Adam's apple unconsciously moved up and down. She was within reach in front of him. As long as he wanted, he could kiss her now and taste her sweetness. Li Mosen looked up at her, and Li Jianhua burst out laughing. Her big dark eyes curved as she laughed. She looked at him with a smile and asked, "What's wrong, Brother Mosen?" Li Mosen looked at her motionlessly, and his lips were slightly pursed. He didn't know how many times he had imagined such a scene in his mind, but at this moment, he hesitated. Li Jianhua was so innocent, and he couldn't bear to hurt her. After a long time, he pinched her cheek and said faintly, "He is not what you see on the surface. Don't get too close to him in the future." Li Jianhua opened her mouth and wanted to defend Quan Jingyi, but when she saw Li Mosen's expression, she silently swallowed the words in her throat. Li Mosen stood up and turned around. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. You can go back." Li Jianhua nodded obediently and said, "Brother Mosen, you must remember to finish your supper." "Yes." Back in her room, Li Jianhua took off her shoes and laid on the bed. She stared at the ceiling and exhaled deeply. She was thinking about how to explain to Li Mosen in the future so that he wouldn't hate Quan Jingyi. Just then, the phone on the table vibrated. She turned over and took the phone. When she opened it, she saw that it was a message from Quan Jingyi. "Quan Jingyi, let's go together after school tomorrow." Li Jianhua blinked and replied, "I always go home with Brother Mosen." The message was sent, but the other side did not reply for a long time. Just as Li Jianhua was about to put it down, Quan Jingyi sent another message, "It's okay. See you tomorrow." Then, he sent another photo. It was a photo of her wearing a Pikachu toy suit today. She held the Pikachu headgear with both hands, and the smile on her fair and lovely face was especially bright. Under Quan Jingyi's brush, her eyes were filled with warm and clear light, making the whole picture become beautiful. This painting was many times better than the ones that Quan Jingyi had sent her before. Chapter 2265. Romance Chinese Network. The latest chapter of the 99th divorce was updated as soon as possible. Li Jianhua was as happy as a child. She quickly replied, "You're amazing. You drew me so beautifully." "Quan Jingyi, it's normal." Li Jianhua laughed and said in a low voice, "Shameless." But when she saw the painting, well, it was beautiful. Li Jianhua smiled and typed a few words, "See you tomorrow." The next day, Li Jianhua rushed to school as usual. Quan Jingyi's seat was still empty. The bell rang and the teacher entered the class with his books. Li Jianhua secretly took out her phone and opened Quan Jingyi's WeChat. Just as she was about to send him a message to ask why he didn't come, a voice came from the door. At the door of the classroom, Quan Jingyi stood there with his school bag on his shoulder. The math teacher looked back at him and said indifferently, "Next time you come late, you will stand outside and listen to the class." Quan Jingyi ignored him and walked over with his school bag. On the podium, the math teacher had already started teaching. Li Jianrui took out her math book and opened it. Quan Jingyi, who was next to her, also sat down. Then, a small wooden box was placed on top of her book. Li Jianrui looked back at him in surprise. Quan Jingyi said lazily, "Try it." Li Jianrui blinked. "You made it." There was no answer, as if he had acquiesced. She glanced at the teacher on the podium and secretly opened the wooden box. When she saw the exquisite candy and cookies placed inside, Li Jianrui's eyes widened in surprise. The cookies were easier to bake, but she didn't know how he made these exquisite and delicious candy. Li Jianrui couldn't believe that Quan Jingyi made all these. What couldn't he do? Just as she was about to raise her head to speak, Quan Jingyi reached out and stuffed a candy into her mouth. Li Jianrui quickly lowered her head and secretly looked at the teacher like a thief. Quan Jingyi's low laughter came into her ears. "Is it delicious?" The sweetness of milk and fruit blended with each other in her mouth. Li Jianrui's cheeks were slightly red, and her heart was beating fast because of her guilty conscience. He was too bold. If the teacher found out, they would be dead. Li Jianrui covered her mouth with the book and whispered, "You're amazing. You even know how to make candy and cookies." Quan Jingyi lowered his eyes and said, "My mother taught me when I was very young." Li Jianrui had never heard him talk about his mother. She said sincerely, "Auntie is amazing." Quan Jingyi lowered his head, his expression unreadable. He murmured, "Yes, she is very powerful." Li Jian suddenly remembered that his mother seemed to have passed away when he was very young. In the afternoon, as the bell rang, the teacher walked out of the classroom with the lesson plans. Quan Jingyi grabbed both of their school bags, kicked his chair away, and walked out of the classroom as well. Li Jianrui was stunned for a moment and shouted, "Hey!" Such a scene attracted the attention of many people. Quan Jingyi walked lazily without looking back. "Let's go home." Quan Jingyi was tall and had long legs. He took 2 steps ahead of Li Jianrui. Li Jianrui was stared at by the surrounding students. Her face was a little hot. She trotted to catch up with him. Quan Jingyi probably thought that Li Jianrui was too slow, so he stopped in his tracks. Li Jianrui finally caught up with him. Just as she was about to take a breather, her hand was suddenly grabbed and she was pulled forward. Li Jianrui blinked and felt the temperature of the youth's palm. Her face was slightly hot. She wanted to pull her hand out, but looking at Quan Jingyi's undistracted look, she was afraid that her action would be too unnecessary. Chapter 2266. A large number of students rushed out of the school building to the gate. Not to mention how cool it was. Li Jianrui's face heated up. She thought about it and wanted to pull her hand back. However, Quan Jingyi held her tightly and said, "Keep up. You're walking too slowly." Li Jianrui thought that he was right. Compared to him, she was indeed walking a little slowly. So, she gave up struggling and asked, "Where are you taking me?" "We're going to have fun and eat delicious food." Hearing this, Li Jianrui's eyes instantly lit up. Delicious food. Or fun. Compared to the amusement park. Quan Jingyi laughed. "Have you only been to the amusement park? Is there anything else fun?" "There are many." Flash dance. Quan Jingyi pretended to be mysterious. Li Jianrui wanted to ask more. Suddenly, she saw a familiar figure standing beside the pillar at the school gate. Li Jianrui was stunned. She looked up and her eyes met Li Mosen's dark eyes. "Brother Mosen." Li Jianrui shouted naturally. When Quan Jingyi heard this, he raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of her gaze. Li Mosen looked at the two of them with a complicated gaze. Then, his gaze fell on Quan Jingyi's hand that was holding hers. Their figures were covered and exposed by the crowd, and they looked like they were walking on the street. A pair of blue eyes looked at their intertwined hands and narrowed. Li Jianhua followed Li Mosen's gaze. As if she had been electrocuted, she shook off Quan Jingyi's hand the next moment. It was as if she had done something guilty. However, she had not done anything guilty. She had even promised Quan Jingyi to play, so she would not go home with him. She had already told Brother Mosen about this. This feeling of guilt was too strong. Li Jianhua was extremely annoyed. Just as she was hesitating about what to say, Li Mosen had already walked towards them. Li Jianhua looked up at Li Mosen. The little girl's face was regretful and conflicted. She said, "Ah. Brother Mosen, why are you here?" "To pick you up." Li Mosen's eyes were gloomy. At this time, his voice also sounded cold. "Go home." "But..." Before Li Jianhua could finish her sentence, Li Mosen grabbed her arm. Li Jianhua was pulled over, but before she could get close to Li Mosen, her other hand was held again. He turned around and saw Quan Jingyi with a faint smile on his face. "Senior, classmate Li has already agreed to go with me. She has also told you about the situation, right?" He did. However, he did not want to agree. Anyone could, but not Quan Jingyi. This male classmate was too aggressive. 16 or 17 years old were the easiest to be seduced by such a boy. How could he allow him to continue to commit crimes? Li Mosen retracted his gaze and said calmly, "I did, but our house isn't in the same direction as yours, so I won't trouble you." Li Jianhua quickly said, "Brother Mosen, I made an appointment with Quan Jingyi to go together." Li Mosen didn't even look at her. He interrupted her with a calm expression and reached out to Quan Jingyi. "Classmate, your school bag." Quan Jingyi looked down at the school bag in his hand and raised his eyebrows. He raised his hand and casually threw the school bag over. He said teasingly, "You will graduate next year. Can you still look at her for the rest of your life?" The careless words were like a thorn, suddenly stabbing into the soft spot that Mosen had never dared to touch. He couldn't. Chapter 2267. Li Mosen took back her school bag and turned around. His face was cold. "You don't have to worry about that." As he said that, he turned around and pulled Li Jianhua. Li Jianhua was a little reluctant. After all, she had already made an appointment with Quan Jingyi. But seeing that Li Mosen was obviously very unhappy, she could only swallow her grievances. For the next 2 weeks, Li Mosen was very strict with her. Time passed quickly, and soon it was the midterm exam. This time, the teacher in charge of the class attached great importance to the exam. It was said that he had formed a bet with the teacher, so he had been very strict with the average score of the class. Even Quan Jingyi, after communicating with the homeroom teacher twice, began to listen attentively in class, which was rare. After the exam, the class monitor suggested that the whole class go out for a gathering. The students were very enthusiastic. Li Jianhua rarely participated in group activities. After reporting to her parents and brother, she joined the after-exam gathering. A group of young people, in addition to the time, wanted to eat and drink to relax, so the class committee set the location at the KTV. The school uniform of No. 1 Middle School was very eye-catching, revealing the atmosphere of youth everywhere. After getting on the bus that the class committee booked, Li Jianhua realized that Quan Jingyi was going with them. Quan Jingyi got into the car lazily. After seeing Li Jianhua, his slightly listless eyes quickly locked onto her. Then, he walked forward and gently tapped the shoulder of the girl beside Li Jianhua. "Can we change seats?" he asked. The girl was Li Jianhua's new desk mate. When she saw Quan Jingyi's expression, she looked at them ambiguously and said, "Sure, but it's not easy to give up this seat." Do you want to bribe me with something? Quan Jingyi asked. When Li Jianyue heard this, she felt that she was a little too much. How could a person like Quan Jingyi use something to bribe someone? But unexpectedly, Quan Jingyi did not immediately refuse. Instead, he lowered his head and rummaged through the bag in his hand. Then, he took out a lollipop and handed it to her. Can I? The girl had only been teasing him. Now that she had received the lollipop, she was even more certain of her guess. She immediately stood up and said, Come on, come on. You can sit here. Our classmate Quan Jingyi actually bribed me just to sit with Li Jianyue. The last sentence was shouted out. The surrounding students were already fooling around. When they heard this, some of the nosy boys whistled. Wow! What a good match. Are they dating? Wow, Li Jianyue is blushing. With the shouts from the surroundings, Quan Jingyi's originally lazy and indifferent attitude gradually disappeared. He turned to look at Li Jianyue and found that her face was red. When Li Jianyue met his gaze, she became even more annoyed and said, Don't talk nonsense. Be careful that I don't get angry. Li Jianyue didn't look intimidating when she was angry. Instead, she looked more like a spoiled child. The boys didn't take it seriously and started to jeer again. Li Jianyue blushed and shouted, I'm going to ignore you guys. If you ignore us, you'll ignore Quan Jingyi. Of course, Quan Jingyi is so handsome. You're not handsome. That hurts. Li Jianyue had already turned her head to look out the window. Quan Jingyi's heart was rippling. Chapter 2268. Oh, it was a little sweet. Li Jianyue was too cute. Quan Jingyi reached out and patted her gently. Li Jianyue turned her head and shouted fiercely, What? Quan Jingyi laughed. Like a kitten. Li Jianyue's face heated up when he laughed like that. She shouted, Hurry up and explain. We're not like what they said. Hurry up and say it. Quan Jingyi looked at her red face and raised his eyebrows. Why is your face so red? It's fine if they say it. Anyway, we just need to know it ourselves. But we're obviously not. Li Jianyue said angrily. Hurry up. All right, Quan Jingyi said with a helpless look on his face. You heard it all, but we're still not. Wow. Still not. Does that mean that we will be in the future? Ha 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 ha, I know. So it's the future Mrs. Quan. Li Jianyue was furious. She turned around and hit him. What kind of explanation is that? That's the explanation. Quan Jingyi looked at her. Don't you know what it means? Li Jianyue's heart seemed to skip a beat. She looked at him with her round eyes wide open. Quan Jingyi moved closer and whispered, You know. Li Jianyue's cheeks turned red. She reached out and pushed him away. She shouted, I don't know. Quan Jingyi was pushed back a few steps. Oh, he said. There seemed to be a hint of a smile on his lips, but at the same time, he didn't. If you don't know, then don't know. Anyway, you'll find out eventually. Li Jianyue's heart beat faster. Behind her was a large group of students jeering. Li Jianyue looked out of the car window, but she didn't see anything. Her mind was buzzing. Quan Jingyi, was he confessing to her? But it didn't seem like it. He didn't say that he liked her. But there seemed to be. The way he looked at her just now, it seemed like he really liked her, really liked her. Li Jianyue kept looking out of the window. After a long time, Quan Jingyi said, Does your brother know that you came out to play? Li Jianyue was stunned for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes. The students on the bus had already begun to play their own games. A few students who were more focused on their studies were exchanging their answers for the midterm exam. Most of the students were laughing with each other. After making sure that no one was making fun of her and Quan Jingyi, the tension in her heart eased a little. Quan Jingyi sensed her nervousness and understood. He quietly leaned closer and whispered, "Does your brother know that I'm here too?" Li Jianyue nodded her head again. However, she subconsciously shook her head again and said, "I don't know either. But I'm talking about a class activity. He should know that you're here too. After all, you're also in our class." Quan Jingyi pursed his lips. "Not necessarily." Li Jianyue averted her eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "But Brother Mosen probably won't be angry anymore, right?" Half a month had passed. In the past half a month, in order not to make Li Mosen think too much and be angry, she took the initiative to distance herself from Quan Jingyi. Quan Jingyi seemed to know what was going on. During this time, he had been tactfully staying away from her. It was the first time that such a situation had happened. Quan Jingyi shook his head slightly. "He's too strict with you. Don't you have no freedom at all?" Chapter 2269. When Li Jianyue heard this, she recalled Li Mosen's tough attitude 2 weeks ago. She knew that her parents and brothers loved her dearly since she was young. Because they loved her dearly, they were afraid that she would be hurt, so there were some restrictions. Li Mosen didn't believe that Quan Jingyi was a good person, so he forbade her from getting along with him freely. Li Jianyue understood all these things. "No, Brother Mosen loves me very much. Maybe he misunderstood something. He doesn't allow me to fall in love at such a young age." Li Jianyue stuck out her tongue. "My father and mother also said that I can't fall in love at such a young age. So, my brother is just concerned about me. It's not just you. It's the same for other boys." The corners of Quan Jingyi's lips curled up slightly. He tilted his head and whispered into Li Jianyue's ear, "Does it mean that as long as I treat you well, I can intervene in your affairs?" His warm breath caressed her ear. Li Jianyue felt that it was a little close to her. She subconsciously shrank back and said, "No." Quan Jingyi looked at her seriously and said in a clear voice, "Then, what if I want to?" Li Jianyue was stunned. She finally realized the distance between them at this time. As soon as this thought popped up in her mind, Li Jianyue's cheeks were burning hot. She felt as if she was being roasted on a fire. Her fair face was flushed and her palms were sweaty. What the hell was he trying to do? Why did he say such strange things to her? Was he really confessing to her? But he didn't even say that he liked her. Was this a confession? Just when Li Jianyue was so nervous that she didn't know how to answer him, Quan Jingyi sat up straight. He seemed very helpless. He crossed his arms over his chest and closed his eyes. He said lazily, "Call me when we arrive." When Li Jianyue saw him turn around, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. Looking out of the car window, Li Jianyue's face was still warm and her mind was in a mess. Due to the large number of people, when they arrived at the KTV, the class committee suggested that they be divided into 2 groups and asked for 2 large private rooms. The class committee originally planned to separate the boys and girls, but they were met with protests from the boys. In the end, the class committee could only divide the male and female equally. After getting out of the car, Quan Jingyi followed Li Jianyue the entire time. At first, Li Jianyue didn't think much of it. However, when she felt the ambiguous gazes of the people around her, she felt her face burning. In such an occasion, Li Jianyue was originally a very active person, but now she felt that she couldn't let go. Especially with Quan Jingyi sitting next to her, Li Jianyue felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. However, there were so many people that almost everyone was squeezing together. She couldn't move even if she wanted to. There were more than a dozen people in a private room. It was very lively when they made a ruckus. Quan Jingyi had been chatting with someone on his phone ever since he entered the private room. Not long after, Quan Jingyi put his phone back into his pocket and said to her naturally, "I'm going out for a while. Call me if anything happens." Li Jianyue didn't think there was anything wrong with it, so she answered casually. However, a boy next to her started to make a fuss. "Wow, you haven't even gotten together yet, but you already have to report your entry and exit. What a sour smell of love." Li Jianyue was stunned. By the time she reacted, the entire room was in an uproar. Her face burned even hotter. She said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense. Shut up, all of you." Quan Jingyi glanced at them. "Girls are thin-skinned. All of you, be careful." Okay, brother Quan." Chapter 2270. We won't tease Aunt Quan anymore, ahaha. Shut up, we're just classmates. Li Jianyue shouted. However, it was clear that it did not have much of a deterrent effect. Quan Jingyi looked at her shy look and didn't stay any longer. He stood up and walked out. After Quan Jingyi left, Li Jianyue felt much more relaxed. After a while, a female classmate next to her handed her a microphone and encouraged her to sing with another female classmate. The song was ordered by another female classmate. It was a common old song, Little Jumping Frog. The song was very cute and cheerful. Li Jianyue did not mince her words. She held the microphone and walked up to the stage. The female classmate's microphone was snatched away by Yang Siheo. Everyone knew about Yang Siheo's fight with Quan Jingyi. Someone joked, "Yang Siheo, you're taking advantage of the situation. Quan Jingyi just left for a while, and you dare to do this. Aren't you afraid that Quan Jingyi will beat you up when he comes back?" Yang Siheo was beaten up so badly by Quan Jingyi. "Yang Siheo, Li Jianyue is the future Mrs. Quan. If Quan Jingyi hits you later, we won't stop him." Li Jianyue's cheeks turned red. She wished she could find a mouse hole to hide in. "Don't talk nonsense," she said angrily with a red face. "If you continue like this, I'll really get angry." On the other hand, Yang Siheo was enraged after being embarrassed. He looked at Li Jianyue nervously and said to the crowd, "That's right. Don't talk nonsense." When did Li Jianyue say that she wanted to date him? He would remember the humiliation that Quan Jingyi gave him for the rest of his life. Now that Quan Jingyi was not here, he felt more confident after saying this. He straightened his chest and said, "Quan Jingyi is a bully. What else can he do besides violence? If he didn't know how to hit people, how could someone as innocent as Li Jianyue fall for a bad youth like him who doesn't study hard?" Although she didn't like it when her classmates teased her and Quan Jingyi, she was still very angry when she heard Yang Siheo insult Quan Jingyi. Last time, he was the one who made the first move. In the end, it was Quan Jingyi who was scolded. Besides, how was Quan Jingyi a delinquent? He was obviously very good at drawing and worked very hard. Before the exam this time, he also studied very seriously. Li Jianyue turned around angrily and was about to defend Quan Jingyi when the door of the private room was suddenly pushed open. "Looks like I, the delinquent youth, didn't beat you, the top student dog, until you learned to speak human language." At the door of the private room, Quan Jingyi had his hands in his trouser pockets. He leaned against the door frame and looked at the shocked Yang Siheo with a faint smile. Beside him stood a tall and beautiful girl. When Yang Siheo saw Quan Jingyi, he couldn't help but shiver. He immediately became terrified. The boys in the class also jeered, "Yang Siheo, hurry up and return the microphone to Zhao Jing. Come down. If you don't come down now, Quan Jingyi will beat you up." Yang Siheo's face turned red with anger, but when he saw Quan Jingyi's half-smile, he didn't say anything. He returned the microphone to the female student next to him. Zhao Jing took Yang Ziheo's microphone and walked up to Li Jianyue. Li Jianyue, I've picked another song. Let's sing it again. Ignore him. Li Jianyue nodded and looked back at the door. Quan Jingyi smiled and raised his eyebrows at her. He said something to the girl next to him and the two of them walked in together. But who was the girl next to him? Li Jianyue couldn't help but look at her. She looked a little familiar. Chapter 2271. The girl obviously noticed Li Jianyue's gaze and waved at her with a youthful smile on her face. The more Li Jianyue looked at her, the more familiar she felt, so she also waved at her. The cheerful music sounded, and Zhao Jing held Li Jianyue's hand and swayed her body. Li Jianyue was a little restrained because Quan Jingyi was back, but she was soon distracted by the music. Zhao Jing's voice was neutral, and she sang the adult male part. Li Jianyue's voice was sweet, and she sang the child's voice. The dream planted in the happy pond becomes the ocean, the bulging eyes and the big mouth sing equally loudly, lend me a pair of small wings and I can fly to the sun, I believe a miracle is on me, la. Under the gorgeous light, Li Jianyue and Zhao Jing let go of each other. The two girls had hardly spoken before, but at this moment, they cooperated very well. Li Jianyue held the microphone in one hand and swung it with the other. She turned around cutely with the rhythm and shook her but happily. In the middle of the song, she and Zhao Jing imitated the little frog and croaked at the same time. Their nose was slightly wrinkled, and their big eyes were moving. Their cute expression instantly made everyone present feel cute. Ha 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 ha. It's so cute. What kind of fairy combination is this? Li Jianyue is so cute. I, a girl, am about to fall in love with her. Quan Jingyi was drinking his drink. He looked at the cheerful and cute girl and curled his lips. For a moment, he was in a trance. Every frown, every smile, every move was like a picture of the scene. She was really cute. Qin Shizhao looked at Li Jianyue and then at him. She asked jokingly, Jingyi, is she the interesting girl you mentioned? Quan Jingyi looked at Li Jianyue without moving his eyes. Qin Shizhao crossed her arms in front of her chest. Although there was a smile on her face, there was a flash of disdain in her eyes when she looked at Li Jianyue. She was so childish. It was obvious that she was a flower in a greenhouse. There were a lot of girls like her outside. How was she interesting? However, she seemed to be the sister of Senior Mosen. Thinking of the black-haired and blue-eyed boy, Qin Shizhao's eyes became more calculating. At the end of the song, the atmosphere in the private room was high. The students were all shouting for Li Jianyue and Zhao Jing to play another song. Li Jianyue sang happily. Usually, when she went out to play with her family, it was always her mother and Mo Yun singing, while the others played by themselves. Even when she was playing with Xiao Xiao and Pan Pan, there were only a few of them cheering for each other. This was the first time that she was singing and performing in front of her classmates, and there were so many people praising her. When Li Jianyue saw her classmates' praises, she couldn't hide her excitement. However, she still shook her head and said, "This is Al's song." "Al, you do it." Al was a male classmate. When he took the microphone from Li Jianyue's hand with a smile, he thanked her. But then, he suddenly pushed her with a bad intention. Li Jianyue was shocked. Just when she thought that she was going to fall, a pair of big hands caught her firmly. Looking back, it was Quan Jingyi. Li Jianyue breathed a sigh of relief. When she glared at Al, he had already pretended to know nothing and turned around to sing. Quan Jingyi chuckled. "Look at how angry you are." His voice was very low, with a hint of doting. Zhao Jing exclaimed, "How doting and sweet." It's really the tone of a boyfriend talking to his girlfriend. You guys should be together soon. Li Jianhua suddenly thought of Li Mosen. Brother Mosen often talked to her like this. Was this doting? Was it sweet? Download address. Chapter 2272. With Ael's funny singing, the room became lively again. Li Jianhua followed Quan Jingyi and sat down on the sofa. Qin Shizhao, who was sitting at the side, took the initiative to reach out to Li Jianhua. Hi, hello. I'm Jingyi's friend. My name is Qin Shizhao. As she got closer, the more Li Jianhua looked at Qin Shizhao, the more familiar she felt. She reached out and shook hands with Qin Shizhao. She also introduced herself politely. Hello, my name is Li Jianhua. Qin Shizhao smiled and asked bluntly, may I ask, why have you been looking at me since I came in? Being asked so directly by Qin Shizhao, Li Jianhua was a little embarrassed, which made her seem very rude. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look at you. I just thought you looked a little familiar. Really? Qin Shizhao smiled in surprise. Me too. When I first came in, I felt that you looked very familiar. Is this fate? Alright, Quan Jingyi took a can of drink and handed it to Li Jianhua. He smiled and said, who are you not familiar with? Qin Shizhao pretended to be angry and hit him. She stood up and pulled him, saying, go to hell. Aren't you embarrassed to be sandwiched between two girls? Make way, I want to sit with Jianhua. The two of them seemed to have a very good relationship. Quan Jingyi was not angry at Qin Shizhao's rudeness. Instead, he smiled and gave way to the two of them. Qin Shizhao also reached out and took a can of drink. She opened it and clinked glasses with Li Jianhua. She winked and whispered into her ear, actually, I've heard Jingyi talk about you a long time ago. I even secretly saw your portrait on his phone. Just now, I even saw your portrait on his phone screensaver. In that case, it was not surprising that Qin Shizhao said that she looked familiar when she saw her. However, Li Jianhua couldn't figure out why she found Qin Shizhao familiar. He felt like he had really seen her somewhere before. But when she heard Qin Shizhao's last sentence clearly, her fair cheeks instantly flushed red. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Quan Jingyi. Quan Jingyi was sipping his drink while watching Ael's performance. Under the light, his handsome side profile was straight and handsome. Li Jianhua's face heated up. She pinched herself in embarrassment. Li Jianhua, what are you thinking? Jianhua, are you blushing? Qin Shizhao smiled ambiguously. Li Jianhua immediately retorted, I didn't. Ah, you're getting more and more popular. Of course not. Li Jianhua's palms were burning from her teasing. When Quan Jingyi heard the laughter, he turned around and looked over. Their eyes met inadvertently, and Li Jianhua quickly pretended to be calm and avoided it. Quan Jingyi raised his eyebrows slightly. What's wrong? Qin Shizhao coughed lightly and looked at Li Jianhua ambiguously. She said, it's none of your business. I'm whispering to Jianhua. It was getting late, and the gathering was coming to an end. Li Jianhua and Quan Jingyi were originally going to take a bus home with their classmates, but because Qin Shizhao's house was nearby, Qin Shizhao invited them to her house to play. After Li Jianhua and Quan Jingyi told the class committee, they went to Qin Shizhao's house together. Qin Shizhao's house was in a high-end neighborhood nearby, and the decoration of her house was also very luxurious. It could be seen that Qin Shizhao's family should be well off. At this time, Qin Shizhao's parents had not returned yet, and there were only servants at home. Download address, phone reading. Chapter 2273. The Ambiguity of Youth. 7. Qin Shizhao ordered the servants to send the snacks to her room, and then brought the two of them back to her room. Quan Jingyi seemed to have come to Qin Shizao's house a lot. He didn't seem to be restrained at Qin Shizao's house. After entering Qin Shizao's room, Quan Jingyi took out the game controller and gave it to Li Jianyue. He said, "I'll teach you how to play games." When Li Jianyue saw this, she was reminded of the game that her brother usually played with Chu. These two perverts often played, but the difficulty of the games they played were too high. She tried it once and was traumatized. Seeing Quan Jingyi like this, he said honestly, "I don't know how to play this game. That's why I said I wanted to teach you." Quan Jingyi sat down beside her naturally. "Try it." "Aw." Li Jianyue held the controller and watched him turn it on. Okay, the game soon began. Li Jianyue realized that this game was not as difficult as the two perverts at home, but it was not easy for her either. Li Jianyue was a little depressed when she died twice very quickly. Quan Jingyi said, "It doesn't matter. It's always like this at the beginning." Qin Shizao teased, Hey, you two have to take care of me, a single dog, okay? I want to play too." Quan Jingyi rejected her heartlessly. "Wait a moment. Let's play a few rounds first." After Qin Shizao's protest failed, she had no choice but to sit beside Li Jianyue with the snacks and drinks brought by the servants to guide her. "Jianyue, beat him up. He's going to die. Beat him up. Quick." "Oh." Li Jianyue was nervous and excited. Her fair and tender face was flushed with excitement. Quan Jingyi glanced sideways at her. His movements were still smooth. Looking at her serious expression, he deliberately tilted the controller. "Yay!" Li Jianyue cheered and high-fived Qin Shizao excitedly. Ha, Jingyi, you little bastard, you deserve this. If I knew that Jianyue could cure you, I would have been friends with Jianyue a long time ago." Qin Shizao snorted with a smile and said, "Who asked you to bully me in the game?" Li Jianyue didn't expect to win one day. She exclaimed excitedly, "Again. Let me do it. Let's play 3-player mode." Looking at the two excited girls, Quan Jingyi held the controller and started the game. He fought the two girls alone. Li Jianyue and Qin Shizao cooperated with each other to fight Quan Jingyi. Every time Quan Jingyi counterattacked, the two girls would scream nervously. Quan Jingyi couldn't help but chuckle. The three of them were addicted to the game and played a few rounds in a row. It wasn't until Li Jianyue's phone rang that they stopped. Li Jianyue took out her phone. When she saw that it was a call from Li Mosen, she became inexplicably nervous. However, she didn't dare to make it too obvious, for fear that Quan Jingyi would misunderstand and get angry. She stood up and walked towards the balcony as she answered the phone. "Hello, Brother Mosen. Is the party over?" She didn't want to lie, but she didn't dare to tell Li Mosen that she was with Quan Jingyi at the moment. Li Jianyue felt a chill down her spine when she thought of how angry Li Mosen had been in the past. She hesitated for a moment before replying in agreement. Li Mosen asked on the other end of the phone, "What's wrong?" Li Jianyue bit her lip and said guiltily, "It's over. I'm playing at my classmate's friend's house now. I'll go home later." "Ha!" Li Mosen's voice didn't sound happy or angry. He asked, "It's so late. Others need to rest. I'll pick you up." Address. End of this chapter. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.